Chapter 465. Chapter 465. Chapter 465. It's all on me. Even though Yi Fei knew that fays that took form from plants and trees were all extraordinary, this was the first time he had seen a little girl who knew how to cry after falling down and had such rich emotions. Of course, you can cry, but what do you mean by grabbing my leg and not letting go? She clearly had a vigilant and fearful expression just now, but now she's grabbing onto me and not letting me go? At this moment, Yi Fei was undoubtedly feeling very depressed. Helpless. He really couldn't bring himself to do anything to this human-like Lingji doll. He could only squat down, look at the little girl and ask, "Little girl, is there anything I can help you with?" After saying that, he thought it was funny. Was he confused? Why would he communicate with a Ganoderma for no reason? This Ganoderma baby probably wouldn't even understand what he was saying. The little girl seemed to understand what Yi Fei was thinking. She suddenly nodded vigorously, indicating that she really did need help. Then she anxiously pointed in a direction. Yi Fei was very surprised. Although there were all kinds of strange things in the world of martial arts, this Ganoderma doll was too miraculous. "Can you understand me?" Yi Fei asked. The little girl nodded vigorously. Her tender fingers continued to point in the same direction as before. This time, Yi Fei understood what the little girl meant. His expression was a little strange. "You want me to take you somewhere?" This time, the little girl nodded happily. Then she let go of her arms and looked at Yi Fei expectantly. Yi Fei was also curious. Anyway, he had nothing to do now. Looking at this Ganoderma doll, it didn't look like it could hurt him. Immediately, Yi Fei decided to follow the Lingji doll to take a look. To be honest, Yi Fei was very interested in this kind of life form that was formed from the essence of heaven and earth. Hence, Yi Fei stood up and looked in the direction the Ganoderma spirit was pointing at. "All right, lead the way. Let's go and take a look together." Bang! Before he could finish his sentence, the Ganoderma lucidum behind him tripped over his right foot and fell flat on his back. His little face couldn't help but become even redder, and his face revealed an aggrieved and pained expression. Only then did Yi Fei see that there was a very deep wound on the little girl's leg. It was obvious that she had been injured by her spirit. Thinking back to what the seventh prince and the others had said, Yi Fei immediately understood that the seventh prince and the others must have discovered the transformed Lingji doll and wanted to snatch it. They even didn't hesitate to injure the Lingji doll. These bastards, I should have broken their arms and legs just now. Yi Fei's face flashed with anger. Even if the Lingji doll wasn't human, she was still a little girl. What should we do now? You can't walk. Why don't I grab you and fly over? You can just be in charge of pointing the way. Yi Fei thought of an idea. He saw that this little girl's ponytail was quite easy to grab, so he prepared to grab it. Of course, this caused the little girl to protest. Bam bam bam! The little girl shouted loudly in protest. She even threw mud and rocks at Yi Fei's face. At the same time, she carefully protected her ponytail and angrily prevented Yi Fei from grabbing it. Yi Fei's expression immediately turned ugly. If it wasn't for the fact that the person in front of him was an injured 3- or 4-year-old girl, he would definitely be angry with her. If you don't let me grab it, then how are we going to get there? Both parties were in a deadlock for a moment. Seeing that the little girl was really unwilling to be grabbed by the head, Yi Fei couldn't think of a better idea. We can't possibly find a rope and tie you up. Hearing this, the little girl immediately rolled her eyes at Yi Fei. This made Yi Fei even more puzzled. She was clearly very afraid and wary of him just a moment ago. Why did the little girl suddenly become very assured of him after a short while? Could it be because I chased away the seventh prince and the others and saved her? Yi Fei thought to himself. The little girl also bit her fingers in distress. She grabbed the ponytail on her head and thought for a moment. Then, she looked at Yi Fei with disdain and stretched out her arms. What do you mean? Yi Fei grabbed his head and didn't understand. The little girl angrily rolled her eyes. She hurriedly and seriously made a few more stretching actions. In the end, seeing that Yi Fei still didn't understand, the little girl finally gave up. She felt very wronged and jumped onto Yi Fei's body and made another stretching action. Only then did Yi Fei understand the little girl's plan. She actually wanted him to carry her? Forget it. I'll carry her then. If we delay any longer, the seventh prince and his group will probably call for reinforcements. Yi Fei awkwardly hugged the Ganoderma doll on his body. Needless to say, although this little girl looked quite small, she was quite heavy. With one look, one could tell that she was a super spiritual medicine that had grown for countless years. If he were to sell her, the entire Tianwu continent would probably go crazy. At least, Yi Fei had never heard of a spiritual medicine that could transform into a living creature. Big sister, that brat is just ahead. We followed the Ganoderma doll here and lost her track. Needless to say, the Ganoderma doll must have been captured by that brat. Big sister, you must avenge me. Not long after Yi Fei left, a large group of young geniuses rushed over like a swarm of bees. They were the strongest youths in the vicinity of the Heavenly King City. Originally, as usual, everyone had come to the southern mountains to train in preparation for the Earth ranking. Who would have thought that someone would discover a Ganoderma that could transform into a living creature in the southern mountains? Such a precious treasure was definitely more precious than any sacred tool. Even if a martial monarch heard about it, he might come over to fight for it. The young geniuses who discovered the Ganoderma doll immediately changed their goal. Instead of killing the vicious beasts, they started working together to capture the Ganoderma doll. Among this group of young geniuses, the seventh prince was not the leader. The real leader was a woman. She was the eldest daughter of the Northern Heavenly King, Beigong Chun. The Northern Heavenly King had a total of 7 children. Besides the 3 who had died in battle, the remaining 4 were Chun Yu, Feng, and Lei. For example, the 7th prince, who had a conflict with Yi Fei, was the youngest, Beigong Lei. However, among the 4 children of the Northern Heavenly King, Beigong Chun was still the strongest. Not only was Beigong Chun strong, but she was also very beautiful. Therefore, she attracted a large number of young geniuses to gather around her. However, Beigong Chun had never taken any men seriously. Beigong Chun only had one goal in life, and that was to surpass her father, the Northern Heavenly King. She wanted to become the first female Heavenly King in Beiyang country and the entire northern region. Then, she would be able to trample countless men under her feet. Therefore, when she discovered the Ganoderma doll in the southern mountains in the form of a little girl, Beigong Chun was undoubtedly extremely excited. When she heard the 7th prince report that the Ganoderma doll might have been captured by the disciples of the Taishan sacred ground, Beigong Chun's beautiful face could not help but reveal a faint trace of coldness. 7th brother, where is the disciple of the Taishan sacred ground that you mentioned? Why don't I see him? Beigong Chun looked at the empty grass and stared coldly at the 7th prince. The 7th prince could not help but shudder. He was not even afraid of his own father, but he was afraid of his sister, Beigong Chun. Big sister, I don't know either. Maybe he knew that I went to get help and escaped from the southern mountains in advance. Escaped from the southern mountains? How is that possible? All the geniuses who come here to hunt must stay for 10 days. If they leave the southern mountains after 10 days, they will be treated as deserters. Even you and I will be killed by the 200,000 soldiers of the southern mountains barrack. Beigong Lei, when will you grow up and not disappoint me and your father? Beigong Chun stared at the 7th prince sternly. The 7th prince lowered his head in shame and said with a sad face, Big sister, I was wrong, okay? Big sister, don't blame 7th brother. I know where that guy went. There is still the scent of a stranger here. My spiritual nose can track him down. In the grass, a girl as beautiful as Baigong Chun bent down to pick up a piece of cloth and sniffed it. Then, she threw it on the ground in disgust. The scent of men is really stinky. Even from 10 miles away I can smell their stench. Chapter 466. Another ancient beast seal, chase after him. Baigong Chun didn't care if there was anything wrong with her second sister's words. Right now there was only one thought in her mind, and that was to find the transformation Lingji. Such a spiritual item would definitely greatly increase her talent and aptitude. It was even possible for her to break through to the heaven grade. How could Baigong Chun let go of such a treasure? How could the young geniuses present let go of it? Especially now that the Earth ranking was changing, any treasure that could increase one's strength was worth fighting for with all their might. Big sister, follow me. I'll bring you to him. Baigong Yu sniffed the air and quickly found the direction Yi Fei left in. Little sister, are you really going to such a place? Yi Fei followed the direction the little girl was pointing in. After walking for less than an hour, he clearly felt that something was wrong. The little girl was actually going to the deepest part of the South Mountain. It was also the place where a large number of martial king-level vicious beasts resided. This was no joke. Yi Fei had no problem dealing with ordinary vicious beasts. However, if he were to face the siege of a large group of martial king-level vicious beasts, not to mention himself, even an invincible martial king like the Northern Heavenly King would have to flee in defeat. Yah! When the little girl saw that Yi Fei had the intention to retreat, she quickly nodded her head. Her finger was still pointing in the direction of the deepest part of the South Mountain. In the end, she looked at Yi Fei pitifully with her big teary eyes and pointed at her injured leg. This time, the little girl didn't need to make too many gestures. Yi Fei understood that the little girl meant that her injury could only be healed in the deepest part of the South Mountain. What else could Yi Fei say? Forget it, I'll help you to the end. Who's the only one who thinks of my sister when I see you? Sigh, I wonder if she's doing well in the Star Moon Holy Land. Yi Fei shook his head and continued to go deeper. At the same time, he was careful to avoid encountering powerful martial king-level vicious beasts. However, Yi Fei realized that he was worrying too much. For some unknown reason, the aura of vicious beasts was extremely rare in the depths of the South Mountain, which should be a place where vicious beasts resided. Along the way, Yi Fei even saw many corpses of martial king-level ferocious beasts, as well as shattered mountains and sunken lands. These were clearly traces of a great battle. Moreover, this great battle was quite terrifying. On the ground, Yi Fei could still vaguely see a mountain-like palm print on the ground. He could also see huge and neat gullies that seemed to have been cut by swords and sabers. This is absolutely not something a martial king-level battle can cause. Could it be that in the depths of the southern mountains, there are still martial lord-level fierce beasts? Squeak, squeak. Seeing that Yi Fei was about to flinch again, the girl made some gestures to comfort Yi Fei. It took Yi Fei a while to figure it out. The girl made a gesture of fighting with her hands. Then, with a frightened look on her face, the two people fighting in her hands suddenly left in a hurry. You're saying that there were martial lord experts fighting here, and as they fought, they suddenly left on their own? Which Wu Jun is that? Are they having fun? Yi Fei could not understand what the two titled battle pet warriors at the level of Wu Jun were thinking. The girl didn't explain. When Yi Fei didn't notice, there was a glint of deep fear in her eyes. As a matter of fact, the two people fighting were not Wu Jun at the level of titled battle pet warriors. They were mighty warriors who were even more powerful than Wu Jun. The two mighty warriors were fighting fiercely for the girl's ownership. Suddenly, they sensed the presence of the Demon King. The two mighty warriors thought there was a martial king. They also noticed the little girl and wanted to fight for her. They were so scared that they hurriedly left and ran for their lives without looking back. Of course, Yi Fei didn't know that. He just felt that those powerful warriors at the 12th level of the martial saint realm were too bored. Why did they come here to fight for fun? Just as Yi Fei was thinking about it, the little girl in his arms suddenly shouted happily. Her finger kept pointing in a certain direction. Not until then did Yi Fei realize that they had reached the deepest part of Nanshan Hill. Fortunately, they didn't run into any vicious beasts along the way. He looked at the place the girl was pointing at curiously. It was a huge natural cave. Unfortunately, half of it had been smashed by the two powerful warriors. There was even a dead body of vicious beasts at the 10th level of the Martial King realm buried under the mountain. Yi Fei could only feel the power of the vicious beasts through the qi and blood it was emitting. Seeing that Yi Fei was staring at the dead body of the vicious beasts, the girl was anxious. She pointed at the gap in the cave and pulled Yi Fei's ear with the other hand. Yi Fei could only walk over with a gloomy face. At the same time, he was very curious. He found that the gap was not big enough. It was only big enough for him to carry the girl. However, this was not a problem for Yi Fei. Yi Fei directly smashed a fist over, smashing out a gap that could allow a person to pass through. Yi Fei carried the little girl and walked in. Immediately, he felt a shocking wave of spirit qi rush towards him. What a shocking fluctuation of spiritual qi! There is a sacred level spirit spring hidden here. Yi Fei looked at the huge spirit spring in the cave, dumbfounded. This spirit spring was different from the one he found with Third Master Shang. The spirit spring of the Constellation sect was almost dried up. However, the spirit spring here was not only full of spiritual qi, but also seemed to have room to evolve. Could it be that the two Wu Jun experts were fighting over this spirit spring? But why did they stop fighting for no reason? They did not even take the spirit spring. Yi Fei felt that the two Wu Jun experts were really strange. The girl did not want Yi Fei to carry her. Instead, she jumped over Yi Fei's body and jumped into the spirit spring. Suck! As the little girl opened her mouth to breathe, a large amount of spirit qi was automatically sucked into her mouth. At the same time, the little girl formed seals with her hands and quickly mobilized the spirit qi around her. It was obvious that she was cultivating a very exquisite martial art. Yi Fei's mouth was agape. He realized that the little girl he had met was too strange. Plants that took form should not have high intelligence, but the little girl in front of him was not only rich in emotions, she could even cultivate in martial arts? What is that over there? Why does it look like the ancient beast mark that Wang Bai gave me? Yi Fei looked at the girl and his gaze was suddenly attracted by a strange mark on the wall of the cave. Upon closer inspection, it was actually 70% similar to the ancient beast mark on his shoulder. Yi Fei recognized it at a glance. It was actually another ancient beast mark. It was different from the beast mark that was branded on his body. The beast mark in front of him gave Yi Fei the feeling that it was branded on the entire cave. Chapter 467. Killing the Emperor's Realm. Empty Fist. Yi Fei had always been curious about the ancient beast mark. Now that he suddenly saw a similar ancient beast mark, he could not hold back his curiosity. Seeing that the little girl was still cultivating in the spirit spring with a red face, Yi Fei didn't want to disturb her. Therefore, he walked to the front of the ancient beast mark and carefully examined it. In the end, he didn't find anything unusual. It was just a bunch of strange symbols. The beast mark did not have any reaction when he used the martial artist's will. But the more it was like this, the more curious Yi Fei became. Seeing that his martial artist's will was unable to detect what the beast mark contained, Yi Fei carefully touched the beast mark with his hand. In the end, he still did not find anything unusual. Strange. Could it be that this beast mark is fake? Or has the energy inside been lost and I cannot sense it? Ever since he obtained the ancient beast mark from Wang Bai, after returning to the sacred land, Yi Fei had been diligent. He searched for information about the ancient beast mark according to the records in the sacred land. Before the martial era, the Tianwu continent had a long period of desolation. In this era, human martial arts had not yet flourished. It was an era of vicious beasts, demonic beasts, savage beasts, and desolate beasts. The ancient beast mark was gradually researched by humans in order to protect themselves and to fight against the powerful vicious beasts. If humans wanted to become stronger, there was only one way. That was to form the beast mark, assimilate the blood of beasts, and study the various killing techniques of the vicious beasts and demonic beasts. Relying on this kind of exploration bit by bit, in ancient times, a very glorious civilization of beast marks and talismans was born. Until, for some unknown reason, the beast marks and talismans suddenly disappeared. Martial arts gradually rose, and the strength of ancient beast marks was gradually forgotten by warriors. Now that an ancient beast mark had appeared in front of him, it would be a lie to say that he was not moved. Seeing that ordinary methods would not work, Yi Fei decided to be ruthless. With a thought, he activated the power of the ancient beast mark on his shoulder. Immediately Yi Fei's skin was covered with a layer of mysterious scales. Looking at the scales on his palm that were harder than dragon scales, Yi Fei smiled bitterly. He also tried to press his palm on the ancient beast mark. Roar! A huge beast roar suddenly entered Yi Fei's mind, and a magnificent scene appeared in front of him. Countless beasts were roaring, and thousands of spiritual lights tore through the sky and blasted toward an ancient man standing in the sky. This person was dressed in animal skin and looked like an ancient ancestor. He ate raw meat and drank blood, but he also possessed a terrifying strength. Facing the attacks of tens of thousands of beasts, the man looked down coldly. He also roared and punched out. Boom! That fist was too terrifying. Yi Fei only saw that the man's fist light actually broke through the light balls formed by tens of thousands of spiritual lights and smashed downwards. Tens of thousands of vicious beasts were destroyed at the same time. Of course, the man's body in the air was also destroyed at the same time. Only his loud laughter made Yi Fei's ears ring. Ha ha ha, myriad beast emperor, if I can kill the foundation of your beasts today, even if I die, I can die in peace. As long as the flame is not extinguished, the world will be passed down forever. Future generations, do not let down my slaying emperor realm empty fist. Remember, remember, the man's voice gradually fell silent, but his voice still echoed in Yi Fei's ears. At the same time, a mysterious message was imprinted in Yi Fei's mind through his palm. Slaying Emperor Realm Empty Fist? These ancient ancestors are really powerful. They are not emperors, but they have the confidence to create a fist technique that can kill emperors. How great and wise are they? After feeling the message in his mind, Yi Fei knew that the ancient beast mark in the cave was left behind by the man before he fought with an emperor-level vicious beast. The Nanshan region was once an ancient battlefield. Back then, the vicious beasts had run amok, and the human race had suffered unspeakably. Countless people had become food for the vicious beasts and had been slaughtered wantonly. The emperor-level powerhouses of the beast race, in particular, had slaughtered people wherever they went. They had almost killed the human race to the point of extinction. Unfortunately, martial arts had not been popular back then, and the human race had no martial emperors. They simply could not withstand the attacks of the vicious beasts. Therefore, some human wise people had gone against the heavens and created taboo martial arts that could kill emperor-level vicious beasts. For example, the Killer Emperor's Realm Empty Fist that Yi Fei had obtained was a taboo move created by a human powerhouse in the past to perish together with his opponent. As long as the Empty Fist was used, no matter how strong the opponent was or what treasures they had to protect themselves, the Empty Fist could guarantee a 100% hit. The price to pay was that the opponent's attack would also hit the user 100% of the time. If the user did not have a life-saving trump card, it was basically a move that would kill both the user and the opponent. Although a great emperor was terrifying, facing hundreds and thousands of human powerhouses who were willing to risk their lives to use the Empty Fist at the same time, not to mention a great emperor vicious beasts, even a divine beast would be defeated on the spot. The empty fist is good stuff. With it, doesn't that mean that I can now ignore the opponent's defense and injure them 100% of the time? Of course, the premise is that I can also withstand the opponent's attack without dying. Yi Fei sat down cross-legged and quickly comprehended the essence of the empty fist. This was a unique move that could be used in a desperate fight against the enemy. At first glance, it looked very weak, but Yi Fei had a feeling that if he used this fist technique correctly, it would definitely be a super powerful fist technique that would not lose to a great emperor's martial technique. According to the current martial technique evaluation, it was at least an upper emperor level martial technique. Not bad. I was just worried that the Sky Demon kill was a little weak, but I ended up with an emperor level taboo martial technique and a saint level spirit spring. If I absorb that saint level spirit spring, I might be able to break through to the 7th level of the martial king realm. After comprehending the contents of the ancient beast seal, Yi Fei hurriedly turned his head in high spirits and planned to soak in the saint level spirit spring as well. However, when he turned his head, Yi Fei almost vomited blood. He saw that the huge spirit spring had been completely absorbed by the little girl in less than an hour. Yi Fei was depressed. Even if it was healing, the consumption was too shocking. There's no more saint-level spirit spring? Yi Fei looked at the little girl with murderous eyes. The little girl nodded timidly. She was a little frightened by Yi Fei's current appearance. Suddenly, she sensed something and pointed anxiously at the entrance of the cave, looking nervously at Yi Fei. Yi Fei obviously knew what she was nervous about. With his strong senses, he had already sensed that there were people rapidly approaching from outside. Why don't you hurry up and escape? I'll help you block them for a while? Yi Fei looked at the little girl and said. In the end, he still could not bear to kill a little girl who had already transformed into a complete human form. The little girl looked around awkwardly. Other than the entrance of the cave, there was no space to escape. She immediately looked at Yi Fei with a dark expression. Don't look at me. I have no choice. If you don't escape and are discovered, even if I don't capture you, others will capture you. Yi Fei also looked at the little girl with a dark expression. What was this Ganoderma baby doing? She had already recovered from her injuries, but she still did not have the ability to escape. Why don't you suffer for a while? I'll dig a hole and bury you first. After I send them away, I'll dig you out. Chapter 468. Haru Bagong Bam Bam Bam. As a result of Yi Fei's words, the little girl threw mud at him again. Yi Fei was completely depressed. He looked at the little girl and said, That's enough. If you hit me again, I'll catch you and eat you up. She didn't say anything. She only looked at Yi Fei with her big teary eyes. It gave Yi Fei a headache. Even if he could do it, he couldn't bring himself to do it. Fine, I'm afraid of you. From now on, hide by my side. I'll see if I can help you get rid of the people outside. Yi Fei compromised. The little girl shook her head vigorously and made a no gesture. Then she pointed timidly at Yi Fei's shoulder and made a hug gesture. Yi Fei's face darkened. Finally, he hugged the little girl again and was about to ask her what was going on. Whoosh! The little girl suddenly used her finger to point at the ancient beast mark on Yi Fei's shoulder. Something magical happened. The beast mark actually tore open a space. The demon, rune inside trembled and turned into a stream of light, sucking the little girl in. Yi Fei was very shocked. The little girl actually entered his ancient beast mark? What Yi Fei didn't expect was that the ancient beast mark had been following him for so long, but he didn't realize that there was a mysterious space inside the beast mark. At this moment, the little girl stayed in the space created by the ancient beast mark. She seemed to be very happy. She waved at Yi Fei and fell to the ground, snoring loudly. Green leaves wrapped around her. Following the little girl's breathing, The ancient beast mark on Yi Fei's shoulder also underwent a magical change. Other than the demon rune, the image of a spiritual herb was also imprinted. Yi Fei suddenly decided that the next time he saw Wang Bai, he would beat him to death. He wanted to see what this guy had given him. His entire body was covered in scales, which made Yi Fei very depressed. Now, he was even more unlucky. Even grass had grown out. Big sister, that stinky man is hiding inside. I felt that the spirit chi inside was very strong just now. Why can't I smell it now? The person who spoke was Bei Gongyu. The person she admired the most was her big sister, Bei Gongchun. The person she hated the most was all kinds of men. Her nose was simply too sharp, and she could always smell things that others couldn't. This made Bei Gongyu the most terrifying tracking expert in the Heavenly King's residence. Since she said that Yi Fei was inside, then there was no doubt about it. Do you want to come out on your own, or do you want me to send someone in to drag you out? Bei Gongchun nodded at his sister. When he looked at the cave, a cold glint flashed in his eyes. She paused for a moment. Seeing that Yi Fei had no intention of coming out, Bei Gongchun revealed her identity. I am Bei Gongchun, the first princess of the Heavenly King's residence. Big sister. He's just a stinky man from a small holy land. Why did you tell him so much? Bei Gongyu was confused. Bei Gongchun had always been very domineering towards men. The surrounding young talents also looked at Bei Gongchun in confusion. Bei Gongchun didn't explain anything. Others didn't know that as the first princess of the Heavenly King's residence, Bei Gongchun naturally participated in many important matters of the Heavenly King's residence. For example, the King of Northern Ocean Kingdom had actually sent someone personally to invite Taishien's sanctuary to participate in the Heaven and Earth Supreme Ranking Contest. He hadn't done it through the Northern Heavenly King as usual. This, of course, had attracted the attention of the Heavenly King's residence. After asking around, the news that Heavenly Insect had been annihilated and that Sword Maniac Elder had entered the way of Sword Sage had spread to the Heavenly King's residence. Bei Gongchun also knew about this and she had her scruples. Hence, she had been courteous. Otherwise, when facing an ordinary Holy Land, as the first princess of the Northern Heavenly King, she wouldn't have taken them seriously. Inside the cave, Yi Fei nodded. He felt that Bei Gongchun wasn't ordinary. She was at least much more powerful than the seventh prince. So it's the first princess of the Northern Heavenly King. I wonder why your highness is looking for me. Knowing that he couldn't avoid it, Yi Fei walked out calmly and looked at Bei Gongchun, who was leading the group. He first noticed Bei Gongchun's appearance and praised her in his heart. What a beauty! When he saw Bei Gongchun's strength, Yi Fei's heart suddenly jumped. LV9 Martial King Realm? At that moment, he felt a sense of fear and danger in his heart. Originally, Yi Fei had thought that he would be able to break through to LV6 Martial King Realm in a few years' time. However, Bei Gongchun, who was only a few years older than him, was already a LV9 Martial King Realm. At that moment, Yi Fei realized how terrifying the geniuses on the Earth board were. Boy, don't talk nonsense here. Where did you hide the Ganoderma doll? You'd better hand it over to us quickly. Otherwise, the Heavenly King's residence will bring troops to raze Taishien's sanctuary to the ground. The seventh prince stood out and shouted at Yi Fei. Loser! Don't you understand my words? Who gives you the right to speak here? Get lost. You're an eyesore. Yi Fei did not even look at the seventh prince. The seventh prince was so angry that his finger, which was pointing at Yi Fei, trembled. As the son of the Heavenly King, even a LV10 Martial King Realm cultivator had to curry favor with him. However, Yi Fei actually said that he was an eyesore. How could the seventh prince tolerate this? I'll reward whoever can teach this boy a lesson. The seventh prince turned around and looked at the group of young geniuses. Seeing that the seventh prince was being humiliated, a young man with a halberd walked out from the crowd and said in a loud voice, Seventh Prince, I'll do it. I'm Qin Chuan. I'm here to see what a North Sea country bumpkin is capable of. Qin Chuan deliberately emphasized the word, country bumpkin. It was obvious that he looked down on Yi Fei and Taishan Sanctuary. Ha 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 ha. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, many young geniuses in the crowd laughed together, especially the seventh prince, who laughed especially loudly. Beigong Chun looked at all of this coldly and had no intention of stopping them. She also wanted to see how strong Yi Fei was. Qin Chuan, teach this stinking man a lesson. Beigong Yu was already waving her fists and cheering for Qin Chuan. Haha, second princess, just watch. Today, I, Qin Chuan, will beat this country bumpkin to a pulp. Bang! Without any warning, Yi Fei, who was standing in the distance, had already appeared in front of Qin Chuan. His iron fist rumbled and smashed into Qin Chuan's face. Qin Chuan let out a blood-curdling scream as blood flowed from his nose. Together with his halberd, he was sent flying and collided with the seventh prince. The two of them rolled on the ground like gourds. Beat me until I'm looking for my teeth on the ground? You're such an arrogant piece of trash. Using a halberd is a disgrace to the flying generals. I'll return your teeth to you. But he raised his hand and grabbed two broken teeth. Yi Fei threw them to the ground. Everyone was shocked to find that Qin Chuan, who was one of the best among them, had two of his front teeth broken by Yi Fei in a single move. Feeling the strange gazes around him, Qin Chuan, who was lying on the ground, was embarrassed and angry. He quickly stood up and raised his halberd, ready to fight to the death with Yi Fei. Humph, country bumpkin, I, Qin Chuan, will fight you to the death today. Qin Chuan, enough. You're not his match. From the crowd, a man who resembled Qin Chuan walked out and stopped Qin Chuan. But big brother, no buts. No one can bully my Qin family and come out unscathed. Qin Bing of the Qin family is here to learn from you. Chapter 469. Becoming famous in one battle, Yi Fei felt a sense of pressure when he saw Qin Bing. When he saw the light in Qin Bing's eyes, he was even more certain of his guess. Qin Bing was an expert. The young talents from the Heavenly King's mansion were not simple. At least in the North Sea, Yi Fei rarely met an opponent like Qin Bing. His fighting spirit was immediately aroused by Qin Bing. Let's fight! As you wish. Qin Bing's eyes suddenly condensed into two bright sword radiances, which pierced through the air and stabbed toward Yi Fei. It's the eye sword. Qin Bing is using a sword. Great. I haven't met a sword expert for a long time. Today I can have a good fight. Boom. Yi Fei's eyes suddenly became sharp. He also condensed two sword radiances, which collided with Qin Bing's sword radiances. Qin Bing's body couldn't help but tremble. There was also a piercing pain in his eyes. You're also using a sword? Qin Bing felt that he had met his match. The surrounding young talents were also very surprised. This guy is using a sword? I've never heard of any famous sword skills in the Taishan Holy Ground. Even Nan Ruofeng used his fist. At this time, the news of the destruction of the Heavenly Yin sect and the death of Nan Ruofeng had not spread. These young talents were surprised to see Yi Fei using a sword. No, the Taishan Holy Ground also has powerful sword skills. Is he from the Sword Peak? Beigong Chun looked at Yi Fei and secretly speculated about Yi Fei's identity. No matter who he is, this stinky man dares to go against you. He deserves a good beating. Qin Bing, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and defeat him. Beigong Yu began to cheer for Qin Bing again. Kill. Whirlwind and clouds, collapse of heaven and earth. After Qin Bing recovered from his shock, he did not take Yi Fei seriously. After all, he was an expert of the LV6 Martial King realm. Even Nan Ruofeng had to look up to him, let alone an unknown disciple from the Taishan Holy Ground. Rumble! A tornado appeared out of nowhere on the ground. Upon closer inspection, it was actually a huge gale formed by the sword qi, which was being pushed forward by Qin Bing. Spiral sword essence? Interesting. It's a pity that your sword is too slow and scattered. A real sword doesn't have too many fancy moves. It stabs when it needs to, and slashes when it needs to, just like me. Boom! Yi Fei formed a sword finger with his right hand. Without even looking at the whirlwind in front of him, his sword finger had already formed a shocking sword shadow that could split mountains and split the earth. The whirlwind in front of him was instantly split into pieces, revealing the shocked expression of Qin Bing behind him. Enlightened Sword Heart, you actually comprehended the Enlightened Sword Heart? Qin Bing was in disbelief. Yi Fei did not use a sword. He only used a finger sword to shatter his attack. Could it be that you haven't learned Sword Heart Illumination yet? That shouldn't be the case. It's quite simple. Yi Fei looked at the emerald green longsword in Qin Bing's hand in puzzlement. Sword Heart Illumination is simple? When Qin Bing heard this, he suddenly had the urge to vomit blood. The young geniuses present also looked at Yi Fei as if they were looking at a monster. He was a LV6 Martial King Realm Martial King and was still so young. How could he have comprehended Sword Heart Illumination? Since when did the Taishan Holy Ground have such a monster? Maybe Qin Bing will be defeated this time. A young genius muttered in a low voice. Nonsense, how could my brother be defeated? Brother, help me take revenge. The Qin clan will win. Qin Chuan ignored his two front teeth and shouted loudly. Hearing Qin Chuan's shout, Yi Fei sneered disdainfully. Is it useful to shout loudly? In front of absolute strength, it's useless to shout until your throat breaks. Devouring Sword Essence. Yi Fei roared and suddenly pointed his finger sword at Qin Bing. A huge sword light whizzed out from his fingertip and quickly turned into a huge black hole, swallowing Qin Bing. Damn it, Spiral Sword Essence, break this black hole for me! Qin Bing shouted angrily. Suddenly, circles of sword ripples appeared on his body and rotated continuously. In the end, they formed a huge spiral whirlwind that pierced toward the black hole released by Yi Fei. It actually temporarily blocked the black hole from advancing. Yi Fei's face was also filled with surprise. He now knew that the young geniuses of Heavenly King City were indeed worthy of their reputation. They were all very powerful, especially the spiral sword essence that Qin Bing had comprehended. The sword qi rotated continuously like a drill, which could greatly increase his attack power. If this continued, he might even drill a hole in the black hole. Of course, Yi Fei would not let this happen. Let's see how much of my sword essence you can resist. Devouring Sword Essence. Yi Fei's face was cold. He suddenly increased his devouring sword essence from 50% to 60%. Considering the uniqueness of Qin Chuan's spiral sword essence, Yi Fei's black hole suddenly shrunk rapidly. Not only did its power not decrease, but its power was also compressed to an extreme. Qin Bing, who was trying his best to pierce the black hole, suddenly felt the pressure increase. The spiral sword essence in his hand could no longer hold on and was completely swallowed by the compressed black hole. Boom! Qin Bing, who had lost his sword essence, could no longer resist the power of the black hole. His body was pierced by the black hole and he fell to the ground, panting heavily. You've lost. Before the black hole completely swallowed Qin Bing, Yi Fei waved his hand and dispersed his devouring sword essence. You're not going to kill me? Qin Bing was very surprised. His sword essence had already been shattered. If Yi Fei wanted to kill him, it would be a piece of cake. I hurt your brother. It's only right for you to stand up for him. Why should I kill you? Yi Fei looked at Qin Bing strangely. Qin Bing was stunned when he heard this. Then, he looked deeply at Yi Fei. He stood up and bowed his head helplessly. I've lost. Qin Chuan apologized quickly. After accepting his defeat, Qin Bing looked at Qin Chuan and ordered. Qin Chuan's face was red with shame. Although he was unwilling, He still bowed his head to Yi Fei. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have looked down on the Taishan sacred ground. I admit now that the Taishan sacred ground is indeed very strong. Forget it. As long as you don't provoke me, it's fine. Yi Fei didn't make things difficult for the two brothers. He could see that the Qin brothers weren't bad people. They were just a little bit competitive. At this moment, the gazes of the surrounding young geniuses towards Yi Fei had changed. Qin Chuan was one thing, but Qin Bing was an expert who had rushed into the top 50 of the Earth list. In the end, he was still defeated by Yi Fei. Then, if nothing unexpected happened, Yi Fei would definitely have a spot on the Earth list. Who is this guy? In the Taishan sacred ground, apart from the Martial Venerables group on the Earth list and Nan Ruofeng, we haven't heard of any powerful people from the sacred ground. Yeah. No wonder my father always told me not to underestimate the heroes of the world. This guy hid his strength really well. It's one thing for him to have strength. It's another thing for him to offend the eldest princess. Although these young geniuses were afraid of Yi Fei's strength, they didn't intend to retreat. They still vaguely blocked Yi Fei at the entrance of the cave. Qin Bing cast a helpless look at Yi Fei and returned to the crowd with his brother Qin Chuan. Bei Gongyu immediately went over and scolded him. Useless thing. How could you lose? Chapter 470. Invitation from the Heavenly King's Mansion. Forget it. You don't have to explain. None of the men in this world are useful. Indeed, in this world, we women are the ones who make the decisions. Bei Gongyu did not wait for the brothers to explain. She had already found a very reasonable reason. Then, she walked past the crowd and walked towards Yi Fei. She hooked her white and tender little finger. Stinky man over there, you are very strong. Do you dare to exchange blows with me? As Bei Gongyu spoke, an aura surged out from her body. It was the aura of a LV-7 martial king. Yi Fei looked at her. She was younger than him. She was already a LV-7 martial king. His face could not help but reveal a hint of seriousness. Although he could kill a LV-10 martial king with the help of a sage weapon, it was still due to the sage weapon. If he really relied on his own strength, he could still fight against a LV-7 martial king. Ordinary martial kings, but he had never fought against a heavenly king's daughter like Bei Gongyu. If you want to fight, I will fight. Yi Fei did not treat Bei Gongyu differently just because she was a woman. He was still full of fighting spirit. He also wanted to see how big the gap was between him and these geniuses. All right, since you have some backbone, I won't kill you. I will beat you half to death and leave you to big sister. Bei Gongyu stared coldly at Yi Fei. Bei Gongchun, who had been silent all this time, suddenly looked at Yi Fei with an extremely serious expression. Others might not be able to sense it, but Bei Gongchun could clearly sense an aura from Yi Fei that even she was afraid of. This was the intuition of all experts. It was obvious that Yi Fei was very strong. At least, he was much stronger than Yi Fei had shown his strength. Xiao Yu, come back. Bei Gongchun called her sister back. Big sister, why? Bei Gongyu did not understand. You are not his match. Bei Gongchun's tone was very calm, but it made the hearts of the young geniuses tremble violently. What? Even second sister is not his match? Is he really that strong? The seventh prince was unwilling to accept this. The surrounding young sky prides also looked at Yi Fei curiously. Yi Fei's gaze was still very calm. He stared at Bei Gongchun and said, You finally can't hold it in any longer and want to make a move against me? Impudent! How dare you speak to my elder sister like that? Bei Gongyu jumped out again and glared at Yi Fei. Yi Fei couldn't be bothered with such an unreasonable woman. Little Yu, step back. With his strength, he does indeed have the right to speak to me like this. Bei Gongyu stopped Bei Gongyu from messing around. Bei Gongyu was very surprised. Even though Yi Fei was strong, he was only a LV-6 martial king. Such a genius was rare in the North Sea, but there were many in the powerful Beiyang country. There was no need for Bai Gong-chun to be so polite to Yi Fei. Bai Gong-yu didn't understand. The young sky prides present were also confused by what was happening. Only Yi Fei could vaguely guess from Bai Gong-chun's attitude and the special status of the Heavenly King's mansion. The news that the old Master Jian had stepped onto the path of a sword sage must have been known by the Heavenly King's mansion, which made Bai Gong-chun a little wary. If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave. Seeing that Bai Gong-chun had no intention of making a move, Yi Fei planned to leave. It was not a pleasant thing to have grass growing on one's body. He planned to find a place where no one was around and kick the little girl out of the beast mark. Wait! Of course, Bai Gong-chun wouldn't let Yi Fei leave so easily. This was not only related to the Lingji doll, but also the prestige of the Heavenly King's mansion. Hearing Bai Gong-chun's voice, the surrounding young sky prides all stepped forward and completely surrounded Yi Fei. They all thought that Bai Gong-chun was going to make a move. Are you trying to bully me? Yi Fei's face instantly turned cold. Humph, we're not bullying you. We're just taking back what belongs to us. The seventh prince still had some brains. He looked at his elder sister in a fawning manner. Bai Gong-chun nodded and said in a low voice, Yi Fei, you're indeed very strong. Considering that you've received an invitation from the Heavenly King's mansion, you're also a guest of the Heavenly King's mansion. I shouldn't have gotten into a conflict with you. However, a treasure like the Lingji doll was discovered by us first. If you snatch it from us, aren't you looking down on the Heavenly King's mansion? What Lingji doll? What are you talking about? How could I possibly have such a thing on me? Yi Fei stopped in his tracks with a shocked expression. He would never admit that the Lingji doll was hidden on him. If he did, it would undoubtedly bring trouble upon himself. Yi Fei, I can't believe you with just one sentence. How about this? Do you dare to hold this conscience stone and loudly say that you didn't steal the Ganoderma doll and that it's not with you? Bai Gong-chun wasn't so easily fooled. She took out a conscience stone and threw it at Yi Fei. As long as Yi Fei lied, the conscience stone would react. Yi Fei was very depressed. No matter how he looked at it, this stone looked like a lie detector from his previous life. However, he wasn't afraid of this thing. Yi Fei immediately picked up the conscience stone and said loudly, I never snatched the Lingji doll. There's definitely no Lingji doll in my spatial ring. Yi Fei secretly changed the concept. Anyway, he wasn't lying. He really didn't catch the little girl. It was the little girl who was thick-skinned and clung onto him. Similarly, he didn't put the little girl into his spatial ring. Originally, Yi Fei planned to just bury the little girl underground. The conscience stone didn't react? He's telling the truth. The seventh prince and the other young elites were dumbfounded. Bai Gong-yu also had an expression of disbelief. Since you didn't catch it, then where did the Lingji doll go? You're asking me? If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave first. Yi Fei threw away the conscience stone and planned to leave. Wait. Yi Fei, we were wrong previously. We misunderstood you. How about this? As compensation, I'd like to invite you to our Heavenly King residence as a guest. When the Earth Roll starts, you can also go to the Imperial Capital with everyone. What do you think? Bai Gong-chun stopped Yi Fei with an apologetic look on her face. However, deep in her eyes, there was a flash of suspicion. Yi Fei knew that the Northern Heavenly King, Princess Royal, didn't completely believe him. She wanted to keep him by her side for a period of observation. Yi Fei hurriedly refused. That's not good. I still have something to do. I want to leave. However, Bai Gong-chun wasn't someone to be trifled with. She revealed a rare smile and said, Haha, Yi Fei, this isn't up to you. Since you've received an invitation from the Heavenly King residence, you should know that the prodigy hunt will take place in Nanshan for at least 10 days. If you leave early, no matter how noble your status is, you will immediately be killed by the 200,000 soldiers in the barrack. Of course, if you have the ability to fight 200,000 soldiers alone, then pretend I didn't say anything. Beigong Yu was also full of smiles. At the same time, she secretly gave her elder sister a thumbs up. Chapter 471. Heading to the capital after witnessing Yi Fei's prowess, none of the young prodigies had any objections to Beigong Chun inviting Yi Fei to join the team. Only the siblings, Beigong Yu and Beigong Lei, didn't like Yi Fei. Seventh Prince Beigong Lei hated Yi Fei for making him lose face. Beigong Yu was simply unhappy with her eldest sister's attitude towards Yi Fei. I really don't know what eldest sister is thinking. This Yi Fei isn't even as strong as me. If I were to make a move, I would definitely beat the crap out of him. Beigong Yu waved her fist at Yi Fei's back. She even flashed her cute little canine teeth. The other young prodigies couldn't help but look infatuated. But when they thought about how Beigong Yu hated men even more than Beigong Chun, these young prodigies became dejected. Knowing that the seventh prince and second princess didn't like Yi Fei, many of the young prodigies accepted Yi Fei. But not many were willing to come over and talk to Yi Fei. Beigong Chun also didn't have any intention of talking to Yi Fei. Seeing that the most suspicious Yi Fei had joined the team, she hurriedly ordered the young prodigies to spread out in all directions. They searched every inch of the ground in an attempt to find the Lingji doll. These young prodigies were indeed very capable. Some used telepathy, some used a compass, and there was even an expert in divination. They were all mumbling to themselves, trying to find clues about the Lingji doll. Of course, the best was still Beigong Yu. Even Yi Fei was surprised by how sensitive her nose was to spiritual energy. He realized that this unruly princess was a natural treasure hunter. She had practically found every path that Yi Fei and the Lingji doll had taken. Fortunately, the Lingji doll was now hidden in the beast mark on his shoulder, so it was isolated from all auras. Otherwise, Yi Fei would be worried that he wouldn't be able to hide the fact that he had the Lingji doll on him. Brother Yi, don't worry. The princess asked you to come with us. She didn't mean to make things difficult for you. On the contrary, the eldest princess is very generous. She has already promised that as long as we catch the Ganoderma doll, everyone will have a share. At this moment, Qin Bing walked over and took the initiative to speak to Yi Fei. He was thankful that Yi Fei had shown mercy earlier. Yi Fei felt that Qin Bing was quite a nice person. At least he was not as arrogant as the other geniuses. Hence, he also tried to strike up a conversation with him. Brother Qin, do you know what happened here? Also, what's up with that Ganoderma doll? Brother Yi, you've asked the right person. If you want to talk about the appearance of the Ganoderma doll, you have to go back to 5 months ago. 2 earth-shattering almighties were fighting on the southern mountain. It's said that they had a battle here, and then nothing was settled. In the end, when we went into the mountains to hunt, we happened to find the Ganoderma doll. I suspect that the 2 earth-shattering almighties were also here for this treasure. Qin Bing looked around and deliberately lowered his voice. After all, only a limited number of people knew about this. If Yi Fei hadn't shown mercy, he wouldn't have told Yi Fei. What? 2 earth-shattering almighties were fighting here? Yi Fei was taken aback. He had thought that there were only 2 Wu Juns fighting here. As it turned out, there were 2 earth-shattering almighties who had reached the 11th level of the Martial Saint realm. That's strange. Didn't they say that even the titled Wu Jun is hard to come by in the northern domain? Why are there earth-shattering almighties here? Yi Fei asked calmly. Qin Bing shook his head and said, Who knows? But my seniors speculated that the 2 earth-shattering almighties didn't seem to be from the northern domain. They must have fled here from other domains. 5 months ago, I don't know what happened to them. I heard that they fled from the northern domain again. Not to mention the Qin clan, even the Heavenly King's mansion was confused about this matter. Only Yi Fei's heart skipped a beat as he vaguely guessed something. 5 months ago, wasn't that when the Demon Emperor showed up? Could it be that the 2 earth-shattering almighties had fled in a panic after sensing the aura of the Demon Emperor? They did not even have the time to catch the Ganoderma doll. If that was the case, those two earth-shattering almighties were as timid as mice. Yi Fei shook his head with a strange look. He remained calm on the surface and tried his best to talk to Qin Bing. Coincidentally, Qin Bing was interested in befriending an expert like Yi Fei too. The two chatted and laughed along the way, thus they did not feel lonely at all. 10 days were gone fairly quickly. The genius hunt had almost come to an end. Beigong Chun and Beigong Yu wore unpleasant looks. The other young geniuses were feeling dejected too. Sister, we're so unlucky. We've searched the entire Nanshan, but we still can't find the Ganoderma doll. I bet she either left this place or flew into the sky. The seventh prince glanced at Beigong Chun with a long face. He and the other young geniuses had been running around for the past 10 days. Yi Fei gave them a sympathetic look too. Sigh. Perhaps this is the will of the heavens. Pass down my orders. Let the army in. While all the powerful vicious beasts are dead, I want to clean up the Nanshan thoroughly. Beigong Chun's face was icy cold. She had finally encountered a spiritual item, but she had missed it. She was furious. Naturally, she vented her anger on the vicious beasts in the Nanshan. Just as Yi Fei and the others left, a large number of soldiers and horses had already charged into the Nanshan. They wanted to take advantage of the fact that the vicious beasts in the mountain were weak to completely eliminate the threat in Heavenly King City. It was only then that Yi Fei realized that the Heavenly King's residents had organized the genius hunt to allow everyone to spy on their enemies. After leaving the Nanshan, Beigong Chun nodded at Yi Fei. Yi Fei, we've troubled you these past few days. You can follow everyone back to the Heavenly King's residence now. Before the Earth leaderboard begins, the Heavenly King's residence will open the gate for you to head to the capital city. With that, Beigong Chun hurriedly left with Beigong Yu and Beigong Lei. However, they weren't heading in the direction of Heavenly King City. Yi Fei felt a little strange. He asked Qin Bing beside him, "Why? Aren't the two princesses coming with us?" "Sigh, their statuses are different. How can the two princesses come with us? They will head to the capital city in advance to meet the king. After that, it will be the day for us young prodigies to participate in the Earth leaderboard." It was obvious that Qin Bing was disappointed with the two princesses' departure. Yi Fei looked at Qin Bing with a strange expression. "Brother Qin, could it be that you—" "Hee, Brother Yi, don't say it out loud. It's fine as long as everyone understands." Qin Bing looked shyly at the departing Beigong Chun. Yi Fei felt a chill run down his spine. However, with Qin Bing by his side, his days in the Heavenly King's residence wouldn't be too boring. 10 days later, a melodious bell rang from within the Heavenly King's residence. A maid rushed over to report, "My lords, the gate has opened. Please make your move." "Are we finally heading to the capital city? I was ranked 107th on the Earth leaderboard last time. This time, I must enter the top 100. Haha, only the top 100? Brother Zheng, your goal is too small. My goal is to be in the top 90. Yi Fei and Qin Bing were speechless. What was the difference between being in the top 100 and being in the top 90? Then, the two of them stood up together. "Brother Yi, please. Brother Qin, please." Chapter 472. Heaven's Pride Clubhouse. The young geniuses of the Heavenly King residence knew their limits. After Beigong Yu and Beigong Chun left, the most powerful people here were Yi Fei and Qin Bing. They could only wait for Yi Fei and Qin Bing to enter the gate before the others could enter. Yi Fei and Qin Bing did not stand on ceremony. The two of them stepped into the gate and disappeared from Heavenly King City. The other young geniuses entered according to their strength and disappeared from Heavenly King City at the same time. After an unknown period of time, boom! The gate opened. Yi Fei walked out and realized that he had arrived at another area. This was the imperial capital of Beiyang country. It was like a creeping dragon entrenched on the ground, full of majestic and oppressive aura. In the depths of the imperial capital, Yi Fei could vaguely sense a terrifying aura. It was so oppressive that he could not breathe. Brother Yi, quickly descend to the ground. This is the aura of a titled martial lord. Without the permission of the country lord, no one is allowed to fly in the sky unless they obtain permission, Qin Bing explained to Yi Fei. Then, the two of them landed on the ground. The other young geniuses who had rushed over did the same. When they saw the imperial capital, many of them cheered happily. Ha ha ha, the imperial capital. It's been 3 years. I'm back again. This time, I must make a name for myself in the imperial capital. Save it. The imperial capital is full of experts. It's not that simple. Even if we break through to the martial king realm, we might become cannon fodder. Brother Qin, Brother Yi, everyone, my family has businesses in the imperial capital. I won't stand on ceremony. I'll take my leave first. It just so happens that I also have an elder in the imperial capital. Let's split up and meet again when the Earth Roll is held. Those who could participate in the Earth Roll were undoubtedly the best around Heavenly King City. Their families more or less had some connections in the imperial capital. Therefore, when they arrived, everyone dispersed and went to find their own connections. Qin Chuan walked to Qin Bing's side. Brother, let's go too. Qin Chuan, you go first. I still have a few friends to introduce to Brother Yi. If you're interested, you can come too. Qin Bing said to his brother. Qin Chuan shook his head gloomily. He glanced at Yi Fei unhappily and left with a cold snort. Yi Fei, my brother is just like that. Please don't mind him. Qin Bing was a little embarrassed. I'm fine. She's just a kid. It's all right for her to throw a tantrum, Yi Fei said understandingly. After all, he had knocked out 2 of Qin Chuan's front teeth. It would be abnormal if Qin Chuan was not angry. Dong. Hearing this, Qin Chuan, who was about to leave, almost fell to the ground. What child? You're even younger than me. Of course, Qin Chuan didn't dare to say this to Yi Fei. Tianjiao Guild Hall. This was the most famous place in the Northern Ocean Kingdom. Every time the Earth Leaderboard started, young geniuses from all over the world would hold a token and stay in the Guild Hall. Then, when the Earth Leaderboard started, they would go to the Imperial Palace together to participate in the competition. It was time for the Earth Leaderboard to be updated again. The originally deserted Tianjiao Guild Hall had become exceptionally lively. Young experts from all over the world had rushed over to participate in the Earth Leaderboard. Some of them were in groups of 3 to 5, while others were escorting them. Of course, most of them were lone warriors who had trained along the way. However, the rules for this year's Tianjiao Guild Hall had changed. In front of the Guild Hall, a sign was clearly erected. Only prodigies are allowed. When they saw this sign, many young experts who had rushed over were very indignant and started shouting at the Guild Hall. What's the meaning of this Tianjiao Guild Hall? We came all the way here to participate in the Earth Leaderboard. Why are the doors closed and we're not allowed to enter? Ha, just because you're all country bumpkins from small places. What kind of place do you think the Imperial Capital is? Do you think you can sneak in and slack off just by spending a few bucks and buying an Earth Leaderboard token? If you came here with such a goal, then get lost. Our Imperial Capital is not a place where any cat or dog can come and behave atrociously. Outside the Guild Hall, there was a large round table. A few young men dressed in luxurious clothes sat there with cold or arrogant expressions. They were drinking and laughing loudly while pointing disdainfully at the young men who had rushed over. This immediately infuriated all the young men present. One had to know that those who could participate in the Earth Leaderboard were not weak. Each of them was the strongest genius in their respective regions. The weakest of them was a level 10 martial honorable. Among them, there were many martial kings. Of course, they would not tolerate being rejected by the Tianjiao Inn, especially when they were blocked. No matter how they looked at it, they looked like playboys from the imperial capital. It's just a few playboys from the imperial capital. If I want to go in, do you think you can stop me? A majestic young man wearing a bamboo hat walked out from the crowd. His tone was cold and indifferent. The scariest thing was that he was wearing a beast's skin. The aura he emitted was faintly filled with a strong smell of blood. This immediately lifted the spirits of the young men who had rushed over. Haha, it's the barbarian robe guest. I know him. On the way here, I saw with my own eyes that he killed a level 1 martial king vicious beasts with only the strength of his flesh. Just the strength of his flesh. Is he a powerful body cultivator? Many young experts revealed fearful expressions as they watched the man slowly walk towards the table in front of them. Get out of my way. The man's words were very cold. However, the 4 young men sitting at the table all had the intention to get out of his way. They continued to eat and drink as if the man did not exist. A level 1 martial king body cultivator? Interesting. Along, you go and deal with him. After a while, one of the 4 young men spoke. Why me? The young man called Along spat out a chicken bone unhappily. The bone was about to hit the man's face. The man did not mind as he said with a smile, well, you're a body cultivator too. Go ahead and let us see whose flesh is stronger. K, is there a need to see? I'm afraid that, if I were to punch him, he would be half dead. My father would beat me to death when we get home. The young man called Along was not willing to do so. The arrogant attitude of the 4 young men had thoroughly infuriated the barbarian robe guest. The man said with a furious tone, How dare you be so arrogant? If you don't attack, I'll make you attack. You won't be able to stop me at the Genius Hall. Bang! A strong gust of wind was emitted from the punch. Before the punch arrived, a loud explosion could be heard in the air, as if the punch was going to shatter the table in front of him. The 4 young men sitting at the table wore furious expressions at the same time. How dare you? How dare you? Along, if you don't attack, the food on the table will be gone. What's with the noise? Where did this bumpkin come from? A level 1 martial king realm cultivator dares to be so arrogant in front of us. Piss off. Along stood up at lightning speed and threw a punch at the man. The force of the punch was 10 times more terrifying than the previous one. The barbarian robe guest vomited blood on the spot as his body was forced to kneel on the ground. Chapter 473. Taking advantage of one's power to bully others. Along, who had attacked, was also shocked. Hey, are you from the Nanman Kingdom in the North Sea? Are you from the Taishan Holy Land or the Heavenly Insect? Forget it, no matter which side you are from, your North Sea only has the Dark Horse Nanruofeng and the Heavenly Insects Zhou Tao. There are no other talents. Get lost, you are not qualified to enter the Earth ranking. Along sat down after speaking and continued to eat and drink with his companions as if nothing had happened. The surrounding youths were also in an uproar. What did they see? A playboy from the imperial capital was actually a LV2 martial king. How strong were the other 3 who had not attacked? As expected of the imperial capital. I can't believe that after cultivating for so many years, we can't even compare to a few playboys from the imperial capital. This is bad. With them guarding here, how can we enter the Tianjiao Guild Hall? It's not that we can't enter. If you are willing to pay the bumpkin entrance fee of 10,000 spiritual crystals each, you can still enter the Tianjiao Guild Hall. Along, who had attacked, laughed as he looked at the surrounding warriors. Everyone suddenly understood that these playboys were waiting here to rob the foreign warriors. It just so happened that Gu Man couldn't hold back his anger and went up to challenge them. In the end, he became the target of killing the chicken to warn the monkey. Their methods were indeed effective. Seeing that Gu Man, who had a strong physical body, was beaten to the point of vomiting blood by the other party's punch, Except for a few LV2 and LV3 martial kings who were still unconvinced and unwilling to pay the spiritual crystals, many LV1 and LV10 martial honored realm warriors began to waver under the pressure. There were a few who immediately went up to pay 10,000 spiritual crystals to Along. Along also waved his hand and let them enter the Tianjiao Guild Hall. Seeing this scene, the number of warriors who went up to pay the spiritual crystals increased. In less than 10 minutes, Along and the other 3 playboys had gathered 1,000,000 spiritual crystals. Even so, they were still not satisfied because most of the powerful warriors had no intention of paying the spiritual crystals. This undoubtedly made the 4 young masters, who were prepared to take advantage of this group of country bumpkins to enter the city and make a fortune, extremely displeased. With a bang, the young man in the lead slammed the table and stood up. "What are you all still standing there for? Let me tell you, you have to enter the Heavens Pride Hall to participate in the Earth ranking today. You only have 2 paths. Either defeat us or pay the spirit crystals. If you don't pay, your name won't be on the Earth ranking this time." Boom! As they spoke, the 3 young men released their auras at the same time. They had already used the method of killing the chicken to warn the monkey. Now, they were going to use their auras to suppress the others. Looking at their skillful movements, many people knew that it wasn't the first or second time that these people had extorted others like this. A few more fearful cultivators felt that they were not a match for these 4 youths, so they helplessly walked up and paid 10,000 spirit crystals to obtain the right to enter the Genius Hall. This also made the 4 youths laugh proudly. Along looked at Gu-man, who had stood up again, and said, "Kid, if you want to go in, you have to pay 40,000 spirit crystals." "Why do I have to pay 40,000 when the others have to pay 10,000? Gu-man was extremely unconvinced. He couldn't beat Along, but as the prince of the barbarian tribe, Gu-man had a strong will. "Haha, why? Let me tell you why. You people from the North Sea can't even be considered country bumpkins. You are all a bunch of country bumpkins. Country bumpkins want to participate in the Heaven and Earth Supreme ranking? Isn't this lowering our standards? Don't you want to give us some compensation?" Along sneered wantonly. Gu-man was completely enraged. He roared and suddenly charged at Along. "Shut up! You can insult me, but you can't insult the entire North Sea. Get lost, country bumpkin. Do you think you can behave atrociously in the capital of the North Sea country just because you have a fortuitous encounter? Let me tell you, if the North Sea wasn't so poor, our king would have destroyed you a long time ago. What 18 countries of the North Sea? I think 18 country bumpkins are more suitable for you." Bang! Without holding back, Along punched Gu-man again. This punch caused Gu-man's injuries to worsen. He flew out over 10 meters and landed heavily on the ground. It was also because the ground of the Heaven's favorite guild hall was very sturdy. If it were any other place, Gu-man would have been smashed into a deep pit. Even so, Gu-man didn't give in. Instead, he roared furiously and stood up from the ground with difficulty. "I want you to take back your words." "All right, I take back my words. I admit that you aren't a country bumpkin. Because in my eyes, you aren't even a country bumpkin. The barbarian body of the barbarian kingdom? Do you think you are very strong?" Along sneered and charged forward. He lifted his right leg and kicked at Gu-man fiercely with wind and thunder. Gu-man's eyes were red. He pushed his barbarian body to the limit, but he still couldn't block the power of Along's kick. Bang! Gu-man's body let out a loud sound. There were already many terrifying cracks on his barbarian body. His blood vessels and muscles were torn apart by Along's kick. Fresh blood dyed the ground red. It was a shocking sight. Immediately, more martial artists had no choice but to endure their anger due to fear and walked up to pay 10,000 spirit crystals. Along didn't look at Gu-man again. After suffering his kick, Gu-man would be seriously injured even if he didn't die. Along planned to walk back and continue drinking and eating meat. Stop, I want you to take back your words. Gu Man's body swayed as he stood up from the ground covered in blood. This time, even Ah Long and the other three were surprised. He can still stand up? Ah Long, it seems like you can't do it. You can't even beat a country bumpkin from the North Sea? All of you shut up. You barbarian, aren't you afraid of death? Alright, then I'll play with you today. Ah Long's face revealed a trace of anger. He was also secretly surprised by the strength of Gu Man's body. Bang bang bang! Ah Long rushed forward. His moves were like dragons and tigers. At the same time, he roared with wind and thunder as he attacked Gu Man. Gu Man didn't show any weakness. He also rushed forward like a madman, wanting to risk his life with Ah Long helplessly. Gu Man was at a disadvantage in the first layer of the Martial King realm against the second layer of the Martial King realm. His powerful body didn't have much of an advantage against Ah Long, who was also a body cultivator. Gu Man was beaten even more miserably this time. Not only was his body covered in blood, even his clothes were torn to pieces. His entire body was trampled under Ah Long's feet like a rag. See? This is the result of resisting us. What are you country bumpkins waiting for? Hurry up and pay the spirit crystals. Don't waste our time to drink wine. It turned out that these playboys were recently short of money and didn't have any money to squander, so they came up with this rotten idea to plunder the new martial artists in the city. Although the Heaven's Pride Hall was a place where martial artists who participated in the Earth list gathered, only ordinary martial artists would come to register. For those who had connections or experts like Yi Fei, there would be people who would go to make friends with them. Naturally, they didn't have to squeeze into the Heaven's Pride Hall. Despite this, Yi Fei still decided to come to the Heaven's Pride Hall to take a look. He had the help of the Qin soldiers, but the 10th Prince and the others didn't. He wanted to come here to see if he could meet any acquaintances. Chapter 474. The Holy Land Can't Be Bullied. Qin Bing, what are these people doing? Yi Fei frowned as he looked at the young men. He had clearly heard them call the 18 countries of the North Sea country bumpkins. Because there were too many people in front of them, Gu Man was blocked. Yi Fei didn't know that Gu Man was also here. In order to protect the reputation of the North Sea and the Taishan Holy Land, Gu Man was beaten up badly by these 4 young men. Qin Bing looked at them with disgust. He said disdainfully, "Who else could it be? They're just a few playboys from the Bai family. If it weren't for the power of the Qian family, how could they be so arrogant?" "Why? Is the Bai family from the capital very strong?" Yi Fei continued to ask as he looked at the warriors lining up to pay the fee. "The Bai family is very strong. At least stronger than our Qin family. The Bai family has a very high official position in the capital. Bai Tianyun of this generation is in the top 3 of the Earth list." When Qin Bing mentioned Bai Tianyun, he was obviously afraid. Yi Fei didn't care. He looked around and didn't see the 10th Prince and the others. Knowing that they hadn't arrived yet, Yi Fei planned to leave. In front of the crowd, Ah Long was still stepping on Gu Man's body. He shouted fiercely, "So, country bumpkins from the North Sea, are you convinced now? As long as you admit in public that the people from the North Sea are country bumpkins and that the Taishan Holy Land is a country bumpkin, I'll let you go. What do you think?" "Bah!" What answered Ah Long was Gu Man's bloody phlegm. "Kill me if you dare. None of us barbarians are afraid of death. Bastard, you think this young master doesn't dare? Just because you dared to spit on me in public, even if this young master crippled your limbs, no one would dare to say anything." Ah Long wiped off the thick phlegm on his face and aimed at Gu Man's legs with both hands, ready to step on them. "It's Gu Man. Why is he here?" Yi Fei turned his head in surprise. He finally saw Gu Man on the ground and was about to be broken. "By Xiaolong, the few of you, stop right now. Hearing that Yi Fei knew Gu Man and that the people on the ground were from the Taishan Holy Land, Qin Bing's expression hardened and he strode forward. Qin Bing, it's you. When did you return to the Imperial City? Bai Xiaolong saw Qin Bing, and the arrogance on his face lessened. The other three playboys also looked at Qin Bing in surprise. They didn't understand why Qin Bing would stand up for the people of the Taishan Holy Land. Qin Bing was too lazy to talk to these debauches. He just pointed at Gu Man on the ground and said, "This person is my friend's fellow disciple. If you don't want to die, then get lost." Qin Bing's words stunned the four silkpants. Bai Xiaolong thought Qin Bing was joking and couldn't help but laugh. "Haha, Qin Bing, your joke isn't funny. You treat the North Sea's country bumpkins as your friends. Are you jealous of us making money here? If you want to get involved, just say it." Bang! Before Bai Xiaolong could finish his words, Qin Bing had already appeared in front of him coldly. With a kick, the man vomited blood and fell to the ground. He was injured to a certain extent. "Do I look like I'm joking? You guys are ignorant and incompetent. You'd better be more polite to others in the future." It was obvious that Qin Bing was quite an upright person. The actions of these few silkpants made Qin Bing unable to continue watching. Yi Fei didn't look at Qin Bing. Instead, he went straight to Gu Man and pulled him up. Seeing that Gu Man was unconscious due to his injuries, Yi Fei was even angrier. He quickly transferred a stream of genuine qi to help Gu Man heal. Within the beast mark, seeing that Yi Fei wanted to save Gu Man, the little girl blinked her big eyes and followed suit. She blew a mouthful of genuine qi outside. A miraculous thing happened. After the heavily injured Gu Man absorbed the genuine qi, he suddenly roared. Not only did his injuries heal, but he also broke through the bottleneck and broke through to the second layer Martial King realm. Yi Fei was completely shocked. Feeling the changes in his body, Gu Man's eyes were wide open. He looked at Yi Fei in disbelief. "Yi Fei, not only did you heal me, but you also helped me break through to the second layer Martial King realm." Gu Man didn't know what to say at this time. He was really grateful and surprised. However, he didn't know that Yi Fei's heart was in turmoil. He quickly used his consciousness to sense the beast mark. He wanted to ask the little girl what she did. She actually helped Gu Man break through to the second layer Martial King realm with just a breath of genuine qi. The little girl also realized that she seemed to be in trouble. She quickly lay down and hid in the green leaves, pretending to be asleep. Yi Fei couldn't find her again. He was so depressed that he didn't know what to say. Another person from the Taishan Holy Land? My God, what did he do? Not only did he heal his injuries, he also helped him break through to the second layer Martial King realm. Yi Fei's move not only shocked Gu Man, but all the cultivators present looked at Yi Fei in disbelief. The four foppish sons were also a little dumbfounded. However, they quickly reacted. Bai Xiaolong, who was kicked, immediately jumped up and stared at Qin Bing fiercely. He then pointed at Yi Fei and said, "Qin Bing, so you really made friends with a country bumpkin. You better think carefully about the consequences of going against our Bai family." Bai Xiaolong, who are you trying to scare with the Bai family? The few of you are nothing more than a fringe member of the Bai family. This young master will slap you in front of everyone. Let's see if the Bai family will stand up for you. Another 3 people walked out from the crowd. They were still dressed like foppish sons. Their tone was even more aggressive than Bai Xiaolong and the other 3. Seeing these 3 people, the 4 arrogant foppish sons were scared speechless. Bai Xiaolong looked at the one who spoke with fear and said, "Long Gang, we are just teaching a lesson to a country bumpkin. We didn't provoke you. Why are you standing up for them?" Long Gang coldly pointed at Qin Bing and said, "Qin Bing is my brother. Qin Bing's friends are our friends. Who do you think you are? When we were foppish sons, you were still playing in the mud. Now get lost and don't let us see you again. You, Long Gang, Qin Bing, and those 2 country bumpkins from the North Sea. We will remember what happened today. Bai Xiaolong didn't dare to say anything. Qin Bing was already difficult to deal with, not to mention that Qin Bing's friends were here. The four foppish sons quickly put away the extorted spirit crystals and wanted to leave. Stop, did I say you can leave? Seeing that Gu Man was fine, Yi Fei walked up and blocked the four foppish sons' path. Get lost, just a country bumpkin. We will give Qin Bing some face and won't argue with you. What else do you want? Bai Xiaolong angrily glared at Yi Fei. They were afraid of Qin Bing and Long Gang, but they weren't afraid of this country bumpkin from the North Sea. Yi Fei didn't get angry. He just turned his head to look at Gu Man and asked, "He was the one who hit you, right?" "That's right, it was this young master. You North Sea country bumpkin, if it wasn't for Qin Bing protecting you, you wouldn't even be worth a hair in this young master's eyes." Bai Xiaolong was furious and wanted to vent his anger on Yi Fei. Yi Fei still maintained his smile, but his right hand suddenly swung out like lightning. With a bang, Bai Xiaolong's cursing stopped abruptly. His whole body was slapped into the ground like a fly by Yi Fei, who knew how many bones in his body were broken. The pitiful Bai Xiaolong cried out and fainted from the pain. Chapter 475. Long Ying's letter. Yi Fei's actions caused a stir in the Tianjiao Hall. The warriors from other places were slightly better, but those who knew Bai Xiaolong's identity, such as Long Gang and Qin Bing, were all staring at Yi Fei with their mouths agape. "Haha, Qin Bing, no wonder you would stand up for this guy. I like this guy's style." Long Gang looked at Bai Xiaolong, who was knocked out by Yi Fei's slap. After the initial shock, he laughed heartily. Of course, the one who was most shocked was Gu Man. It turned out that after Yi Fei returned to the Holy Land and suppressed the elders, Gu Man was greatly stimulated. He simply left the Holy Land and decided to come to the Beiyang country to gain experience. On the way, Gu Man also experienced a great adventure. His barbarian body had a breakthrough, and his cultivation had risen to the first level of the martial king realm. This was also the reason why Gu Man was full of confidence and wanted to participate in the Earth ranking. As a result, Gu Man found that he had once again suffered a heavy blow. First, it was these fops in the imperial capital. Each one of them was more powerful than the other. In the North Sea they were all top geniuses. What depressed Gu Man the most was Yi Fei's strength. At this time, Gu Man found that with his cultivation of the second level of the martial king realm, he could not sense Yi Fei's specific strength. This was undoubtedly a very terrifying thing. "Yi Fei, what's your cultivation level?" Gu Man walked over and asked unwillingly. He had always regarded Yi Fei as a competitor. He wanted to see how big the gap was between him and Yi Fei now. Sixth level of the martial king realm. Yi Fei had nothing to hide about his cultivation level. With this level, he could be called a tyrant in the North Sea. In the powerful Beiyang country, or even the entire northern region, the sixth level of the martial king realm was simply not enough. Even so, when they heard that Yi Fei's cultivation level was the sixth level of the martial king realm, the remaining three fops almost fainted from fright. Sixth level of the martial king realm. When did a country bumpkin from the North Sea become so terrifying? The three fops looked at Yi Fei in horror. They were afraid that Yi Fei would also hit them and knock them out on the spot. Being injured was a small matter, Yi Fei would be embarrassing them. That was worse than death. "Put down the spirit crystals and the trash on the ground," Yi Fei said coldly. He had no intention to continue. Yi Fei was too lazy to continue fighting against such a spoiled brat. Furthermore, the imperial capital was not like other places. He did not want to inexplicably go to jail again and lose the qualifications to participate in the Earth rankings. "Brat, if you have the guts, just you wait. This matter, our Bai family will not let you off." The three silk pants painfully threw down the spirit crystals, grabbed the unconscious Bai Xiaolong, and fled. Yi Fei simply didn't take Gu Man's warning seriously. He just walked over and picked up the spirit crystal bags that the 4 silk pants had left behind. He discovered that these 4 silk pants had actually extorted more than 2 million spirit crystals in a short period of time. He immediately faintly smiled and unceremoniously put these spirit crystals into his spatial ring. At this time, Yi Fei turned around. He stared at Gu Man and asked, "Gu Man, tell me, what is a martial artist? What is the martial Dao?" "Martial artist? The martial Dao?" Gu Man was stunned. Without giving Gu Man time to think, Yi Fei said in a deep voice, "In my opinion, the martial Dao is to go against the heavens. Fight against the heavens, fight against the earth, and fight against people. A martial artist should be indomitable, unyielding, and would rather die than be humiliated. If you're afraid of this and that, then what's the point of cultivating? What's the point of comprehending the Tao?" Yi Fei's words were not only for Gu Man to hear, but also for those who had been bullied by the 4 fops. They had even spent money to avoid disaster. Of course, Yi Fei wouldn't refund any of the spirit crystals they had spent. He didn't care if Gu Man could understand him or not. Yi Fei nodded slightly and walked over to Qin Bing's side. At this time, Qin Bing was still catching up with Long Gang and the others. When he saw Yi Fei coming over, Qin Bing immediately introduced him enthusiastically. "Brothers, this is Yi Fei, the holy son of the Taishan Holy Land. He is also a good friend of mine. Yi Fei, these are my good brothers from the imperial capital. They are Long Gang, Qing Ming, and Zhang Dezhuang." Qin Bing introduced the 3 people beside him to Yi Fei. Among them, the tallest and strongest one was Zhang Dezhuang, who looked like an angry King Kong. Not to mention his strength, just his aura alone made people feel that they shouldn't provoke him. Qing Ming's face was sallow and his eyes were swollen. He was dressed like a typical fop. However, if one thought that he was a playboy, one would be gravely mistaken. Fops were only on the surface. Yi Fei could vaguely feel that this person was in the 4th layer of the martial king realm. Of course, the most heroic one was Long Gang. His whole body had a kind of powerful aura. Just now, when Long Gang opened his mouth, the 4 arrogant fops didn't dare to talk back. It could be seen that Long Gang's family was not simple in the imperial capital. At first glance, these 3 people were more powerful than the 4 fop. However, they didn't have the feeling of bullying others like the 4 fop. After the introduction, Long Gang, Zhang Dezhuang, and Qing Ming swarmed over and greeted Yi Fei with a smile. "Haha, you are Yi Fei? Qin Bing's friends are our friends. In the future, if the Bai family makes trouble for you, just say the word. We will fight them together." Zhang Dezhuang's eyes were filled with excitement. At first glance, one could tell that he was a violent person. Pighead scrammed to the side. "With Brother Ye's skills, do you think he's afraid of a few Bai clan disciples?" Qing Ming kicked Zhang Dezhuang to the side and walked over to talk to Yi Fei. The last one, Long Gang, was even more ruthless. He kicked the 2 of them away at the same time. Seeing that the surrounding cultivators were unwilling to leave, many of them looked at Yi Fei, wanting to say something but hesitating. Long Gang glared at the surrounding cultivators and said, "What are you looking at? There are so many of you, yet you are afraid of 4 useless fops. Aren't you afraid of losing face? Hurry up and get into the hall. I don't want to annoy you." "Not good. He is Long Gang from the Long family. The Long family is very powerful in the imperial capital." "What? The Long family? The water in the imperial capital is too deep. It seems that we won't be able to get back the spirit crystals we paid." Sigh. The surrounding cultivators looked at Long Gang with fear. The cultivators who had paid the spirit crystals earlier walked into the hall helplessly with sullen faces. Hearing their discussion, Yi Fei's heart skipped a beat. He looked at Long Gang and said, "You are a member of the Long family. What is your relationship with Old Master Long Ying?" "Long Ying, that is my uncle. Brother Yi, you have met my uncle before. He has been out for 10 years, and there has been no news of him. Where is he now? Long Gang looked at Yi Fei excitedly. Yi Fei suddenly broke out in a sweat. Being locked up in the imperial prison was a very embarrassing thing. No wonder old Master Long Ing would rather be locked up for 10 years than say a word to the Long family. Ahem, here is a letter from the old master. Take a look at it yourself. Yi Fei didn't say anything. He just took out Long Ying's letter. Long Gang hurriedly opened it and read it carefully. What? My uncle is actually living in seclusion in Heavenly Monarch City and is friends with you, Yi Fei? You even want my Long family to take care of you in the imperial capital. Long Gang looked like a straightforward person. The letter was originally a very private one, but he actually read it out loud in front of everyone. Chapter 476. Flower Fairy Palace, Uncle? Long Gang's expression suddenly became extremely awkward. Yi Fei looked younger than him, but he suddenly had to address him as Uncle Yi. It was too difficult for him. Ahem. Let's go our separate ways. Yi Fei was not ignorant of the ways of the world, and quickly said with a smile. Only then did Long Gang let out a sigh of relief. He suddenly found Yi Fei more pleasing to the eye. Seeing that Yi Fei was not making things difficult for him, Long Gang could not be too stingy and said generously, All right, then let's go our separate ways. However, since Uncle specially wrote a letter, my Long family cannot be stingy. How about this? From today onwards, a 3-day trip to the Flower Fairy Palace is on me, Long Gang. This immediately shocked Zhang Dezhuang, Qin Bing, and Cheng Ming. What? A 3-day trip to the Flower Fairy Palace? The cost of a day there is exorbitant. Long Gang, don't puff yourself up at your own cost, Zhang Dezhuang said in surprise. We won't care if you puff yourself up. When the time comes and you don't have the money to pay, we won't lend you any. Besides, we don't have that much money, Qing Ming said darkly. Why don't we go somewhere else? How about the Purple Garden Palace? Qin Bing suggested. No. We must go to the Flower Fairy Palace. Qing Ming and Zhang Dezhuang, who were mocking Long Gang, suddenly objected. Long Gang also chuckled and said, Money is not a problem. Don't we have a letter from Uncle? Since Uncle instructed us to treat Brother Yi well, then we can't be too shabby. Don't you think so? As he spoke, Long Gang winked at Yi Fei. Only then did Yi Fei understand that Long Gang was trying to use a chicken feather as a token of authority. Qin Bing and the other two also understood and immediately shut their mouth. They even revealed a strange smile. No matter how Yi Fei looked at that smile, he felt that it was rippling. This made Yi Fei feel very strange. He could not help but ask, What kind of place is the Flower Fairy Palace? From the looks of it, you guys seem to be yearning for it. Could it be a martial arts holy land? Brother Yi actually doesn't know about the Flower Fairy Palace? That's right. Your North Sea is more isolated from the news, so it's normal that you don't know. Brother Yi, please don't worry. Although the Flower Fairy Palace is not a martial holy land, it is even more wonderful than a martial holy land. There's no time to lose. Let's go to the Flower Fairy Palace right now to give Brother Yi and Qin Bing a welcome dinner. Yes, we have to be quick. The seats there are very limited. If we're late, there won't be any seats left. Anyway, the Long family will pay for it. This time, we don't ask for the best, only the most expensive. Go. You guys just won't let go of my Long family. Long Gang and the other two were discussing excitedly. They were even about to take action immediately. They looked like they couldn't wait. Yi Fei was even more curious. However, he didn't reject their invitation. After all, he had a good relationship with Qin Bing. At the same time, Yi Fei was also curious when he saw how excited they were at the mention of the Flower Fairy Palace. Gu Man, what about you? Do you want to come with us? Yi Fei turned his head and looked at Gu Man, who was still standing not far away. At this time, Gu Man was awakened from Yi Fei's words. He looked at Yi Fei with a complicated expression. Then, he looked at the imperial capital's young masters who were very close to Yi Fei. Suddenly, Gu Man couldn't help but let out a deep sigh. He understood that he had lost. He had completely lost to Yi Fei. This wasn't a failure in talent. It was the difference in martial intent. Senior Brother Yi, thank you for your guidance. I finally understand where the gap between us is. However, I won't give up. Even if I can't become your opponent now, in the future, I, Gu Man, will definitely catch up to you and then surpass you. Gu Man wasn't discouraged. Instead, an even stronger fighting spirit emerged from his body. Gu Man was sincerely convinced when he called Yi Fei Senior Brother Yi. Then, Gu Man walked into Tianjiao Hall without turning his head back. Yi Fei was surprised to see the sudden change in Gu Man's state of mind. He couldn't help but smile. Qin Bing also looked at Gu Man in surprise. He nodded his head and said, Brother Yi, your comrade isn't simple. As long as he can maintain this fighting spirit, soon, your Taishan sanctuary will have another talent. Qin Bing, you are wrong. In the sanctuary, besides Gu Man and me, there are many other talents. Soon you will see them. Yi Fei smiled as he looked at the sky far away. He knew that soon Jing Wushou, the 10th prince, Shi Feng, Qi Chuchu, Lin Sen, Yang Shao and Luo Shi, these friends and brothers, would rush over to the capital to participate in the Heaven and Earth Supreme Ranking List. When he arrived at Flower Fairy Palace, Yi Fei finally understood what Long Gang meant when he said that it was more beautiful than a martial arts sanctuary. He saw long legs and arms, flowers and fragrances everywhere. Those who stood at the entrance of the palace were all top-notch beauties. There were 100 of them at one time. They bent their backs neatly and smiled sweetly, revealing a hidden depth. This is Flower Fairy Palace. You actually brought me here? Yi Fei's forehead was covered in cold sweat. In the beast mark, the little girl seemed to know where this place was. She was protesting and looking down on Yi Fei. If it wasn't for the fact that she was afraid of being captured, the little girl would have the impulse to pick up a stone and throw it at Yi Fei's head. That's right. This is Flower Fairy Palace. It is the most famous place in the capital to squander money. In the capital, you can choose not to participate in the Heaven and Earth Supreme Ranking List, but you have to come to Flower Fairy Palace. Of course, Brother Yi, don't misunderstand. The beauties in Flower Fairy Palace sell their skills, not their bodies. Unless you have the ability to make them recommend themselves, then just pretend that we didn't say anything. Also, after you enter, you can admire the beauties, but don't forget yourself. Getting physical is a big taboo. Of course, if you have the ability to ignore the entire Flower Fairy Sacred Sect, then just pretend that we didn't say anything. Flower Fairy Palace? Flower Fairy Sacred Sect? Yi Fei was surprised. He couldn't help but ask curiously, what kind of sect is a sacred sect? He knew about sacred grounds, but it was his first time hearing about sacred sect. Qin Bing explained, above the sacred grounds are sacred sects. However, in the north region, martial arts have declined. There are only sacred grounds and no sacred sect. Only in the central region are the remnants of ancient sects. Among them, Flower Fairy Sacred Sect is a unique ancient sect that only accepts female disciples. Their martial arts are particular about cultivating in the secular world. Hence, Flower Fairy Sacred Sect will be stationed in any important warrior city. What? Flower Fairy Sacred Sect is an ancient sect? They came from the central region? Yi Fei was even more surprised. He had a faint expectation in his heart. His sister's Star Moon Sanctuary was in the central region. Maybe he could find out about Star Moon Sanctuary through Flower Fairy Sacred Sect. Or maybe he could send a message to his sister. Originally, Yi Fei planned to contact them through the Merchant Alliance. Unfortunately, Shangluo was too treacherous. She treated him like a fat sheep to be slaughtered. Yi Fei was too lazy to argue with her, so he delayed it. Now that he had coincidentally met the Huaxian sacred sect from the central region, this idea in Yi Fei's heart became fiery again. Without waiting for Qin Bing to speak, he rushed into Flower Fairy Palace. This made Qin Bing slightly stunned. Long Gang, Zhang Dezhuang, and Cheng Ming looked at Yi Fei with disdain. They thought that Yi Fei was just pretending. Now that he saw the beauties, wasn't he becoming impatient? Of course, it was impossible for any man to not be tempted by a large group of beauties walking around in front of him. In fact, Yi Fei was impatient, but they were even more impatient than Yi Fei. Chapter 477. Musical Enlightenment. As soon as Long Gang entered, he started shouting, "Sanyang, Sanyang, are you there? We're here to support you again. Hurry up and call out the Flower Fairy." "Oh, I was wondering who it was. Isn't this Master Long, Master Zhang, Master Qing and Master Qin? This master from the Taishan Holy Land looks unfamiliar. May I ask for your name?" Soon, a middle-aged noblewoman in her 30s came over with a smile. She curtsied gracefully, which surprised Yi Fei. It was hard for him to imagine that a noblewoman in the martial king realm would be selling her smile here. The Flower Fairy Holy Sect was indeed not an ordinary place. No wonder it could attract a large number of people to come here for entertainment. Yi Fei looked around and saw that they were either nobles or martial king experts. He nodded inwardly. Yi Fei said. "So it's young Master Yi. I'm Du Sanyang, the manager of the Flower Fairy Palace. Master, if you've taken a fancy to that girl, just tell us. We won't let you down," Du Sanyang said with a smile. Her eyes flashed with surprise. What Taishan Holy Land had produced such a young expert? Seeing that Du Sanyang only talked to Yi Fei, Long Gang and the other two became anxious. The three who had just despised Yi Fei anxiously shouted to Du Sanyang, "Sanyang, where's the Flower Fairy? We're here to support her." "Haha, you want to see the Flower Fairy? What a coincidence. She's playing the Guqin in the North Court now. As for whether you can win her favor, it depends on your ability." Du Sanyang turned her head and teased Long Gang and the other two. She was really smooth and slick. It was hard to imagine that she was an expert in the first realm of the martial king realm. Long Gang and the other two obviously had no intention of chatting with Du Sanyang. Zhang Dezhuang, who looked the most honest, was also the most anxious. Yi Fei and Qin Bing looked at him with disdain. Zhang Dezhuang shouted painfully, "Sanyang, you have to help me. I like the Flower Fairy too much. I can't live without her." As he spoke, Zhang Dezhuang grabbed Du Sanyang's soft hand tightly, unwilling to let go. In the end, even Long Gang and Qing Ming couldn't stand it anymore. They hurriedly kicked him and hurriedly ran towards North Court. Yi Fei and Qin Bing quickly followed. "Hurry up. Every time the Flower Fairy appears, it's always full. Let's hope that we still have seats when we get there." Long Gang and the other two. They suddenly forgot they had come to help Yi Fei and Qin Bing to welcome. Fortunately, Yi Fei and Qin Bing didn't mind. Seeing their anxious looks, Yi Fei was quite curious. He turned his head and asked Qin Bing, "Is that Flower Fairy beautiful?" "It's just so. I still think the eldest princess is prettier." Qin Bing had a very serious expression. Long Gang, who was walking in front, turned back and said disdainfully, "I really don't know what you like about Beigong Chun. You even have a misconception of beauty. In terms of beauty, who can compare to the Flower Fairy?" "That's right. The Flower Fairy is not only as beautiful as a fairy. Most importantly, her music can make people fall into an epiphany. That's the most important thing." Zhang Dezhuang also turned back and said anxiously. Qing Ming quickly comforted him, "Pig, don't worry. You've been stuck in the second layer of the martial king realm for a long time. This time, the Flower Fairy's music will definitely make you have an epiphany and break through." Yi Fei finally understood why Long Gang and the other two were so anxious. Looking at the beauty was secondary. Their main purpose was to break through. This made Yi Fei even more curious. To be able to comprehend, just by listening to the zither music, this flower celestial saint sect was really not simple. No wonder so many martial artists were willing to pay so much to come to the flower celestial palace. Dong. Just as they approached the gate of the north garden, waves of melodious music could be heard outside. The music was very special. It gave Yi Fei a feeling that it was not something that could be played by a human. It was more like the sound of nature. As the music spread, the surrounding of the north garden bloomed and withered and bloomed again. It was like the cycle of life and the evolution of the world. What a unique music! Yi Fei could feel the power of the music, and could not help but reveal a shocked expression. Then, he looked at the lady playing the zither in the pavilion. With a glance, Yi Fei was stunned. It was not that the flower fairy was too beautiful, but she looked very ordinary. However, it was her ordinary appearance that matched with her natural aura and natural music. Yi Fei actually had the illusion that she was a natural beauty. Only then did he know that in this world there was a type of woman. They could not be very beautiful, but their temperament and their gentle beauty could make them shockingly beautiful. This is the flower fairy? That's right. She is the flower fairy. The first time I saw her, I was just as surprised as you. She is a truly extraordinary woman. Unfortunately, she is still lacking compared to the eldest princess. Qin Bing's face was filled with infatuation, but he was looking at the air. Yi Fei immediately felt a chill run down his spine. This Qin Bing was a typical infatuated man. He was hopeless. Long Gang, Zhang Dazhuang, and Qing Ming, who had run in ahead of time, could not wait to follow the zither music. They naturally sat down cross-legged and listened carefully to this heavenly zither music, trying to enter the state of enlightenment that cultivators dreamed of. However, they were helpless. There were too many distracting thoughts in their minds. The music only made them hold their breath and enter a deeper level of cultivation. They were still a little short of epiphany. On the other hand, Qin Bing seemed to have sensed something when he heard the music. He stood on the spot and entered the state of epiphany. Yi Fei was speechless. He also wanted to enter the state of epiphany. However, he did not know if it was because his mind was too strong. Even when he heard the music, Yi Fei's mind was still very clear. He did not show any signs of epiphany. How depressing. It seems that having a strong mind isn't a good thing. Yi Fei smiled bitterly and shook his head. Isn't that so? If we were as pure as Qin Bing, our ranking on the earth roll would definitely be higher. Unfortunately, the temptation of the beauty is too great. Yi Fei realized that Long Gang and Qing Ming were constantly sneaking glances at the flower fairy while they were cultivating. It would be strange if they could enter the state of epiphany. In fact, although there were many warriors who came to listen to the music, most of them were like Long Gang and Qing Ming. They were completely unable to resist the natural beauty of the flower fairy. Their minds were scattered, and no matter how long they listened, they could not enter the state of epiphany. In the end, most warriors came to the Flower Fairy Palace to have fun and take the opportunity to get close to the beauties. There were not many who were purely cultivating like Qin Bing. Ha ha, isn't this Long Gang and the rest of you trash? With your little talent, you want to enter the state of epiphany? I think you should wait for your next life. Suddenly, a well-dressed young man walked in from outside the North Park. He was accompanied by a large group of people who were trying to curry favor with him. These people were all martial king experts. However, they had no choice but to follow behind this person. It was obvious how powerful this person was. Who is it that disturbed my cultivation? Zhang Dezhuang suddenly stood up angrily. He was just about to enter the state of epiphany when a burst of laughter suddenly woke him up from his cultivation. Zhang Dezhuang was not the only one who was startled awake. Qin Bing, who was in the state of epiphany, also groaned and was forced to wake up. Bai Tianqing, why did you disturb our cultivation? Qin Bing stared coldly at the well-dressed young man who walked in. Chapter 478. Flower Funnel Bai Tianqing? Could it be someone from the Bai family? Yi Fei frowned as he looked at Bai Tianqing. He realized that this person had small eyes and a thin mouth. He was obviously a vicious person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have forcefully interrupted Qin Bing and Zhang Dazhuang's enlightenment the moment he came in. In the world of cultivators, it was taboo to disturb someone's cultivation. Furthermore, this was a rare moment of enlightenment for cultivators. Qin Bing was calmer and was able to hold back his anger. However, Zhang Dazhuang was a violent person. He had been stuck in the second layer of the Martial King realm for a long time. He had been hoping to break through to the third layer of the Martial King realm after listening to the zither. Bai Tianqing's interruption had caused Zhang Dazhuang to lose this opportunity. Bai Tianqing, are you looking for trouble? I, Zhang Dazhuang, will meet you. Zhang Dazhuang roared. He was like an angry beast as he suddenly charged at Bai Tianqing. Humph, Zhang Dazhuang, with your little ability, do you think you can fight me? It seems like you're determined to protect this country bumpkin. Bai Tianqing pointed at Yi Fei with a cold expression. It was obvious that he was here to settle the score with Yi Fei. After all, the Bai family was a reputable superfamily in the imperial city. However, a disciple of the Bai family was slapped unconscious by Yi Fei in public. If Yi Fei was also from a big family in the imperial city, the Bai family would be angry, but they wouldn't care too much. However, when Bai Tianqing heard that Yi Fei was just from the North Sea, he couldn't bear this anger. It was Bai Tianqing's idea to have Bai Xiaolong and the others block the Heaven's Pride Hall and extort the foreign cultivators. The spirit crystals that Bai Xiaolong and the others extorted were originally for Bai Tianqing to squander. Now that Yi Fei not only beat up the Bai family's people, but also stole so many spirit crystals, Bai Tianqing naturally wouldn't agree. Almost as soon as the news reached the Bai family, Bai Tianqing led his men and angrily ran over to settle the score with Yi Fei. Cloud clapping hand. Bang. Bai Tianqing's palm emitted a cloud of mist as it collided with Zhang Dazhuang's fist. The furious Zhang Dazhuang felt as if his fist had hit a ball of cotton. It was soft and without any strength. Following which, an astonishing rebounding force caused Zhang Dazhuang, who was already shaken, to groan and retreat several steps. A trace of blood leaked out from the corner of his mouth. Fourth layer Martial King realm? You actually broke through again? Zhang Dazhuang's face was filled with unwillingness. Haha, that's right. Level 4 Martial King realm. If you don't want to suffer, then back off quickly. I'll teach you a lesson this time. My main target this time is this country bumpkin. Bai Tianqing pointed at Yi Fei proudly. Yi Fei rubbed his nose and did not say anything. He planned to take action immediately. However, Zhang Dazhuang's injury angered Qin Bing, Long Gang, and Qing Ming. Brother Yi, don't interfere first. Bai Tianqing, others may be afraid of your Bai family, but we are not. Since you dared to hurt Dazhuang, we won't let you off. Long Gang and Qing Ming stepped forward and said at the same time. Qin Bing did not say anything. He only pulled out his green sword and coldly stared at Bai Tianqing, apologized to Brother Dazhuang immediately. Otherwise, I'll exchange a few moves with you. Qin Bing, you actually broke through to level 6 Martial King realm? Feeling the terrifying aura from Qin Bing, it was Bai Tianqing's turn to be somewhat fearful. That's right. It's not too late for you to apologize to Dazhuang now. Qin Bing coldly said. Ha me? Apologize? You teamed up with this country bumpkin to bully my Bai family. You should be grateful that I didn't settle the score with you. How dare you ask me to apologize? Don't forget who my brother is. Bai Tianqing roared fearlessly. He had no intention of apologizing. It's a pity that Bai Tianyun is not here. Seeing that Bai Tianqing refused to apologize, Qin Bing was too lazy to say anything more. He stepped forward and was about to attack. "How dare you?" Bai Tiancheng was shocked. Although they had the advantage in numbers, if Qin Bing really wanted to attack him, Bai Tiancheng was not confident that he could withstand it. However, Bai Tiancheng was indeed sinister. Seeing that force did not work, he suddenly shouted at Qin Bing, "Qin Bing, you unromantic fellow! Why don't you take a look at where you are? This is the Flower Fairy Palace. Do you dare to use force in the Flower Fairy Palace? Scum! Shameless bastard! You were the one who started the trouble, yet you still dare to blame us." Long Gang, Qing Ming, and Zhang Dezhuang were all furious. Many of the warriors present looked at Bai Tiancheng with disdain. However, the Bai family was powerful and Bai Tiancheng was not someone that ordinary warriors could afford to offend. Everyone was angry but did not dare to say anything. "Young masters, please give me some face. If you use force in the Flower Fairy Palace, I won't be able to answer to my superiors." The Flower Fairy finally stood up and helplessly tried to mediate the fight. Bai Tiancheng immediately turned his head and looked at the Flower Fairy with a fiery gaze. "Fairy, don't worry. I'm not like those idiots who only know how to offend beautiful women. How about this, Qin Bing? Let's follow the rules of the Flower Fairy Palace and have a duel." Seeing that Yi Fei was already mingling with Qin Bing and the others, Bai Tiancheng quickly thought of a good idea to kill 3 birds with 1 stone. If he succeeded, not only would he be able to deal a heavy blow to Qin Bing and the others, he would also be able to teach Yi Fei a lesson. Of course, most importantly, he would be able to obtain the Flower Fairy's body and mind. Thinking of such a scene, Bai Tiancheng felt a fire burning in his lower abdomen. "Young Master Bai wants to hold a flower battle?" The Flower Fairy seemed to have reacted. "What's a flower battle?" Yi Fei was confused. "Brother Yi, you don't know this, but in a place like the Flower Fairy Palace, there are many beautiful women like clouds. There's also a lot of trouble. It's possible to fight every day. If that happens, the Flower Fairy Palace can forget about doing business. So, the Flower Fairy Palace invented the flower battle." Qin Bing explained. "The so-called flower battle is where we martial artists use our true essence to ripen spirit herbs and spirit flowers. Not only does this test a martial artist's control over their true essence, but the ripened spirit flowers can also be given to the various fairies to win the favor of the beauties. At the same time, it's also a way to show off one's taste." Long Gang added. It could be seen that the Flower Fairy Palace's flower battle method satisfied the taste of many martial artists who wanted to pretend to be cultured. However, Yi Fei felt that in this flower battle, winning the hearts of the beauties was the most important thing. Was he thinking too much? "How about it? Let's hold a flower battle. Whoever wins can propose a condition to the other." Bai Tiancheng didn't even look at Yi Fei. From his point of view, Yi Fei was at most a follower hiding behind Qin Bing and Long Gang. His main opponent was still Qin Bing. "Brother Yi, what do you think?" Qin Bing frowned as he turned to look at Yi Fei. "You can do whatever you want. I don't care." Yi Fei shook his head, clearly lacking interest. He was wholeheartedly focused on cultivating the martial way. He really didn't have much interest in these cultured things. However, just because he wasn't interested didn't mean that others weren't interested. After all, martial artists spent most of their time cultivating. When they heard that someone wanted to hold a flower battle, many martial artists immediately gathered around with great interest. "Compete with him! Compete with him!" Seeing that Yi Fei didn't object, Long Gang and the other 2 shouted at the top of their lungs. They were all young and impulsive. Naturally, Long Gang and the other 2 couldn't stand it. In front of a flower fairy, they were afraid of a challenge. Qin Bing immediately revealed a bitter smile. Yi Fei didn't care. After all, whether Long Gang and the others won or lost, Bai Tiancheng couldn't do anything to him. Chapter 479. Conspiracy, young Master Bai, young Master Qin, young Master Long, young Master Zhang, young Master Qing, and young Master Yi, since you want to hold a flower battle, I'll get people to start preparing. The flower fairy raised her head and looked at Yi Fei. With her intelligence, she naturally understood that the conflict between Bai Tianqing and Qin Bing was because of Yi Fei. A country bumpkin like him wants to hold a flower battle. I reckon that country bumpkin hasn't even seen a spirit flower before. Wah-ha-ha-ha-ha. Hearing Bai Tianqing's mocking words, the group of martial kings behind him all burst into unbridled laughter. Yi Fei still didn't say anything. As his strength increased, so did his horizons. For people like Bai Tianqing, Yi Fei didn't even have the slightest interest in making a move, so why bother bickering with them? However, while Yi Fei was able to remain calm, Long Gang and the other two were unable to tolerate it. After all, they were all young masters of aristocratic families in the imperial capital. They couldn't allow others to be arrogant in front of them. Bai Tianqing, cut the crap. I, Long Gang, alone can take care of you. Don't go back on your word when you lose. Long Gang stood out with a face full of confidence. Haha, this Bai Tianqing actually dares to hold a flower battle in front of Fairy. Could it be that he doesn't know that in order to win Fairy's heart, Long Gang spent an entire year researching flower battle techniques? Qing Ming and Zhang Dazhuang stood to the side with a smile, not interfering. Yi Fei was speechless when he heard this. He felt that Long Gang and the other young masters of the imperial capital were really too free. They actually spent an entire year researching flower battle technique. Perhaps this was the difference in status. In the end, Yi Fei had climbed up step by step from the bottom. He understood how difficult it was to cultivate. However, Bai Tianqing and the other young masters of the imperial capital were born with large amounts of cultivation resources to squander. They never had to worry about cultivation. Therefore, they had the time to research some entertainment. Bullshit, I'm a man of my word. How can I go back on my word? But you, Long Gang, if you lose, I'll make sure you die a horrible death. Flower Fairy, please host this flower battle. We want to compete in the twin flowers on a stem. Bai Tianqing looked at the Flower Fairy with a fiery gaze. When the surrounding cultivators heard that Bai Tianqing was going to fight the twin flowers on a stem, many of them who were also in love with the Flower Fairy had ugly expressions on their faces. Qing Ming and Zhang Dazhuang almost went up to fight Bai Tianqing to the death. This scum, he actually dares to have designs on the Flower Fairy. Long Gang, if we can't beat him to death, we'll beat you to death later. Brother Qin, what is the Bingdi flower? Why are they so excited about it? Yi Fei asked. Bai Tianqing was right. Yi Fei knew nothing about spirit flowers. Over at the North Sea, everyone was cultivating with all their might. None of the martial artists had the time to fiddle with spirit flowers and spirit grasses. Long Gang and the other two looked at Yi Fei speechlessly. They knew that Yi Fei wouldn't be of much help in this flower battle. Qin Bing wasn't interested in the flower battle either, but he still understood the basic rules. He was in charge of explaining the rules to Yi Fei. The Flower Fairy Palace has countless beauties, but only 28 of them can be called fairies. Each of them has their own natal spirit flower. The flower battle is mainly to win the hearts of these fairies. Among them, the twin flowers just happen to be the Flower Fairy's natal spirit flower. Qin Bing shook his head and added, the Flower Fairy Palace also has another rumor. Whoever can make a fairy's natal spirit flower bloom to its most perfect state will be able to propose a reasonable condition to the Flower Fairy Palace. While the two of them were talking, the Flower Fairy Palace had already sent over 2 pots of twin flowers on a stem. The Flower Fairy also stared at the 2 pots of twin flowers on a stem nervously. After all, these were her natal spirit flowers. She had to be careful. Master Bai, Master Long, please be merciful. The Flower Fairy looked at the two of them with her bright eyes, then retreated with her maidservant. Yi Fei and the surrounding martial artists did the same. They all retreated a distance, leaving a large empty space. Long Gang was the first to walk up and choose a pot of spiritual flowers. He stared coldly at Bai Tianqing and said, "Bai Tianqing, you chose the most difficult twin flowers on a stem the moment you arrived. It seems that you are most likely here for the flower fairy." "Humph, a fair lady is a gentleman's mate. A beauty like the flower fairy is not worthy of me. Do you think she is worthy of you bumpkins? Old Hua, I'll leave this flower battle to you." Bai Tianqing smiled sinisterly. He didn't go up and choose a spiritual flower. Instead, he took a step back and respectfully gave way to an old man behind him. This old man's strength wasn't high. He was only a rank 9 martial honorable. However, seeing that Bai Tianqing respected him so much, it showed that this old man had some ability. "Haha, well said, well said. Since Master Bai has hired me, I will definitely not disappoint you." Old Hua was full of confidence. In terms of fighting strength, 10 of him couldn't even compare to one of Long Gang's fingers. However, when it came to nurturing spiritual flowers and spiritual grasses, Old Hua was definitely a master. When this old man appeared, the previously confident Long Gang suddenly roared furiously at Bai Tianqing. "Bai Tianqing, don't you have any shame? We agreed that the two of us will fight. What are you trying to do by asking this old man to come up? Hee Long Gang, you are still too inexperienced. Who said that people can't be invited to a flower battle? If you are afraid, you can fight together. Old Hua, is there any problem on your side?" Bai Tianqing looked respectfully at Old Hua again. "No problem. If they fight together, I will accompany them." Old Hua exuded a strong sense of confidence. This confidence didn't come from his martial techniques, but from his lifetime of experience with spiritual flowers. At the same time, many of the martialists present had heard of Old Hua's great name. When they saw that Bai Tianqing had actually managed to invite such a master of the flower Dao, many of the martialists shook their heads. They believed that Long Gang's side was most likely doomed in this battle. A rare look of anxiety appeared on the flower fairy's face. She clasped her hands together as she looked at Old Hua and then at Bai Tianqing. Anger and nervousness flashed in her eyes. However, the flower battle was a tradition of the Flower Fairy Palace. This time, they were competing for her natal spiritual flower. She couldn't interfere even if she wanted to. When he saw that Old Hua's appearance had silenced everyone, Bai Tianqing smiled proudly and said, "Long Gang, I will give your Long family some face. If you admit defeat now and hand over that country bumpkin behind you, I can reconcile with you." "What if I refuse?" Long Gang said through gritted teeth. "Humph, then I will not only beat you to a pulp in this flower battle, but I will also make you crawl out of the Flower Fairy Palace." Bai Tianqing smiled sinisterly. He had come here with a premeditated plan. Even if he was wary of Long Gang's strength, he still wouldn't be able to defeat them. If it was just a flower battle, Bai Tianqing believed that even if Long Gang and Qin Bing teamed up, they wouldn't be a match for Old Hua. This was evident from the flower fairy's nervousness. Despicable. F***ck, Bai Tianqing's targeting of Brother Yi is fake. He even invited Old Hua with a large sum of money. This time, he must be targeting the flower fairy. Zhang Dezhuang and Qing Ming widened their eyes in anger. Qin Bing also frowned. He looked at Long Gang, who was in a dilemma, and then looked at Yi Fei. Chapter 480. Even if you lose, don't lose. Can we win if we fight together? Yi Fei asked. This was not a battle between warriors. If it was a real battle, any one of them would be able to kill Elder Hua. Unfortunately, this was a flower battle. Looking at the old man's disdainful aura and Bai Tianqing's respect for him, they knew that this old man must be very skilled. I can only say that it will be very difficult. Qin Bing sighed and shook his head. Elder Hua is the titan of the spirit flower world. His experience in cultivating spirit flowers is unparalleled in the imperial capital. There are 28 fairies in the Flower Fairy Palace, and half of them lost their spirit flowers to him. However, to be able to invite Elder Hua, one must at least be at the level of a heavenly king. What kind of joke is this by Tianqing? How can he invite Elder Hua? Long Gang also retreated, his face full of unwillingness and depression. So that's how it is. Since we can't win, then let's not compete. They are targeting me. At worst, I will go out with them. Yi Fei still had an indifferent smile on his face. Qin Bing and Long Gang became anxious when they heard this. At the same time they said, "No, you are our friend. How can we stand by and watch when our friend is in trouble?" That's right. This time, Bai Tiancheng is not only targeting Brother Yi, he is targeting the Flower Fairy. We must not let him succeed. Qing Ming said. At worst, we will lose face. As long as we are thick-skinned, what is there to be afraid of? Zhang Dezhuang also patted his iron-like muscles. Then let's fight together. Qin Bing was helpless. He understood that this was the only way. Yi Fei looked at them coldly. Can we win if we fight together? The possibility of losing is still very high. These words made the four of them lower their heads. Long Gang didn't say anything for a long time. Bai Tiancheng arrogantly urged, Long Gang, Qin Bing, you guys aren't afraid, right? If you're afraid, hurry up and admit defeat. This young master won't make things difficult for you. You guys can just reluctantly crawl out of the Flower Fairy Palace with that country bumpkin. Ah, the Long family's people crawling out. This is big news. Hurry up and call more people to watch the show. The group of martial kings behind Bai Tiancheng also joined in the commotion. There were even people who spread the news everywhere, attracting even more people to come and watch. Qin Bing and Long Gang's expressions became extremely ugly. Zhang Dezhuang was already roaring angrily and wanted to fight with Bai Tiancheng again. Fortunately, Yi Fei and Qing Ming reacted quickly and dragged Zhang Dezhuang back. Hurry up and call Sanyang over. The Flower Fairy ordered the maid beside her in a low voice. Then, she glanced at Elder Hua with fear. The old and decrepit flower also stared at the Flower Fairy and said with a fake smile, I've long heard of the Flower Fairy's great name. In order to research the Flower Fairy's natal spirit flower, the old and decrepit elder has been thinking hard for 3 years. I hope the Flower Fairy will be merciful. Many people didn't understand what Elder Hua was saying. Only Flower Fairy's face turned ugly when she heard Elder Hua's words. Oh, I was wondering who it was. So it's Elder Hua. Elder Hua, this is a battle between the young people. Why do you need to interfere? I hope Elder Hua can give this servant some face and be merciful this time. My Flower Fairy Palace will be eternally grateful. Du Sanyang quickly rushed over. Before she arrived, she was already smiling, giving off the feeling of a spring breeze caressing one's face. However, when she saw Elder Hua, a trace of anger and disgust flashed in the depths of her eyes. However, it quickly turned into a pleasant smile and bowed slightly to Elder Hua. Elder Hua didn't stand on ceremony. Facing the martial king's bow, he arrogantly accepted it and said with a fake smile, Haha, Du Sanyang, it's not that this old man doesn't want to give you face, but the Bai family has helped this old man before. This old man has no choice but to agree to nephew Bai's help this time. Of course, this old man's greatest wish is to pluck all 28 natal spirit flowers of the Flower Fairy Palace. If your Flower Fairy Palace has the ability, you can stop me. If anyone can stop this old man swears that he will withdraw from the flower fighting world and not interfere again. Elder Hua said proudly. Boom. His words fiercely shocked all the cultivators present. One had to know that Elder Hua was able to obtain the favor of the various aristocratic families and even the Heavenly King stage powerhouses with a cultivation of 9th-level martial honorable realm. It was all because of his superb cultivation of spirit flowers. Without these skills, Elder Hua was nothing in the eyes of the martial king. At this moment, Elder Hua actually dared to say such words in front of everyone. It could be seen how confident he was in breaking the Flower Fairy's natal spirit flowers. Many of the Flower Fairy Palace's people's faces changed on the spot. Bai Tiancheng was both surprised and happy. His gaze towards the Flower Fairy became even more fiery. He hurriedly urged Longang, "Longang, do you still want to compete? I advise you to immediately admit defeat and draw a clear line between you and that country bumpkin. This young master can still forgive you. Bastard, if it wasn't for Elder Hua, this young master wouldn't even put 10 of you in his eyes." Longang was very sullen. Qingming, Zhang Dezhuang and Qin Bing were so angry that they couldn't speak. No matter how strong they didn't have the confidence to face Elder Hua, who had said that he would break all of the Flower Fairy Palace's natal spirit flowers. "Sigh, Brother Yi, I'm really sorry this time. I originally wanted to give you a welcome dinner, but I implicated you and caused you to be humiliated with us." Longang was very depressed. Qin Bing also angrily shook his head. "We can only admit defeat this time. If we continue with the flower battle, we will only be humiliated even more. It's better to crawl out of the Flower Fairy Palace." "What? Crawl out? Are we really going to do this?" Qing Ming's face twisted. They were, after all, young masters with reputations in the capital. If they were to crawl out in front of everyone, it would be too humiliating. "If we don't crawl out, can we act shamelessly? I, Zhang Dezhuang, will not do such a thing." Zhang Dezhuang looked thick-skinned, but he was actually very principled in his heart. Seeing Qin Bing and the other 3 lose so miserably and still not draw a clear line between them, Yi Fei nodded inwardly. He understood that they were good friends. Of course, he would not watch them be humiliated. "Qin Bing, all of you stand down. Bai Tiancheng's main target is me. I will go up alone and compete with him in the flower battle." Yi Fei stepped forward, walked past the 4 people, and headed straight for the flower battle arena. "What? Is Brother Yi crazy? He can't even distinguish the specific types of spiritual flowers. How is he going to compete with them?" Longang was very shocked. Qin Bing vaguely understood something. He looked deeply at Yi Fei. "Yi Fei doesn't want to implicate us. Even if he is going to be humiliated, he wants to be humiliated alone." "Humiliated alone?" Qing Ming's face was full of shock. Suddenly, he looked very seriously at Yi Fei's back. "This is a true friend. It's just a humiliation. Not to mention crawling out. Even if I have to crawl out, I, Zhang Dezhuang, will accept being friends with such a person." Dong dong dong. Zhang Dezhuang took heavy steps and caught up with Yi Fei. Qin Bing, Qing Ming, and Longang also suddenly laughed loudly and followed after him. "You guys." Yi Fei looked at the few of them. F***ck, when a friend is in trouble, we will sacrifice ourselves for him. Yi Fei, don't say anything. If you say anything, our ears will hurt. Longang grimaced in a mischievous manner. Chapter 481. Outsmarting oneself. Elder Hua, do it. Don't hold back. Use your full strength. If you can make the Flower Fairy's natal spiritual flower bloom perfectly, I'll give you anything you want. Bai Tiancheng's expression was very ugly. He had only wanted to use Elder Hua to pressure Qin Bing and Longang, so that they would back off and destroy their friendship with Yi Fei. That way, the Bai family wouldn't have so many scruples when dealing with Yi Fei. However, what Bai Tiancheng didn't expect was that the 4 of them didn't flinch and chose to stand with Yi Fei, even though they knew that they were facing Elder Hua, one of the most prominent figures in the flower battle world, and that they were destined to lose and be humiliated. They still chose to stand with Yi Fei. Bai Tiancheng's heart surged with anger. This despicable North Sea country bumpkin. It's because of him that this young master has offended both the Long and Qin families. When the flower battle is over, this young master will definitely make him beg for death. Longang also stared at Bai Tiancheng fiercely and encouraged each other. Don't be afraid. Even if we lose, we won't lose face. Furthermore, Qin Bing and Yi Fei are both experts of the 6th martial king realm. If we can't use our skills, we'll use our true qi. Especially Yi Fei. You don't have any experience in the flower battle. Don't make a move first. Wait until you've learned how to cultivate the spiritual flower. You can make a move when you've learned it. Qin Bing reminded him worriedly. After all, they were all young people. Even though they knew that they had a higher chance of winning, Qin Bing and the other 3 were still in high spirit. Yi Fei stood at the back and did not say anything. After all, he was a layman when it came to cultivating spiritual flowers. At this time, he should speak less and observe more. You 5 ignorant juniors. When it comes to martial arts, this old man is no match for you. But when it comes to nurturing spirit flowers, all of you together can't even compare to a single finger of this old man. Don't say that this old man is bullying you. The 5 of you, start nurturing them first. This old man will drink a cup of tea to moisten his throat. As soon as he finished speaking, Bai Tianqing personally handed a cup of tea to Elder Hua. He happily said, Elder Hua, whether or not this young master can win the flower fairy's heart will all depend on you. Young Master Bai, don't worry. This old man has been in seclusion for 3 years in order to solve the most difficult twin spirit flowers of the Flower Fairy Palace. As long as this flower is solved, this old man will be able to uproot the other 13 natal spirit flowers with a lift of his hand. Elder Hua arrogantly reached out his hand and made a gesture of pulling out the grass. It was as if he could casually reach out and pluck the spirit flowers of the fairies. Bai Tianqing was so excited when he saw this. Many of the surrounding cultivators looked at Elder Hua with fiery gazes. It seemed that as long as Elder Hua was present, they would be able to obtain the beauties of the Flower Fairy Palace. Brother Yi, do you understand now? This is the special way to cultivate spiritual flowers. However, you have to be careful. Spiritual flowers are 10 times more delicate than spiritual herbs. The cultivation of the twin spiritual flowers is the most difficult. If you are not careful, the spiritual flowers will wither and we will fail. Long Gang first explained to Yi Fei how to cultivate spiritual flowers. Then, he was the first to use his own true yuan to transform it into a special spiritual energy. He poured it into the twin spiritual flowers seedling. The half-curled green leaves of the seedling were nourished by the spiritual energy and immediately stretched out. Good, this Long Gang's technique is exquisite. It seems that he has put in a lot of hard work in the flower Dao. Some of the flower fighters couldn't help but cheer for Long Gang. Old Hua was leisurely sipping his tea. When he saw Long Gang's technique, he commented arrogantly, "Your technique is not bad, but your zhenqi is not refined enough. That's right, you juniors spend all your time cultivating. How would you know the habits of spirit flowers? This old man will give you some pointers." Whoosh! Old Hua also stood up with his hands clasped behind his back. He had the demeanor of a master. Old Hua didn't make a move. He only circulated his Zhen Yuan and suddenly blew out a cloud of strange spirit qi toward the spirit flower sapling. After being nourished, the curled green leaves of the twin spiritual flowers in the flower pot suddenly stretched out and emitted a faint fragrance. Seeing this scene, the flower fairy and third Aunt Du's faces suddenly became very ugly. Long Gang also couldn't help but look back and stare at Elder Hua with some fear. Dense spiritual energy. This old man is indeed worthy of being called the Titan of the flower fighting world. Maybe his spiritual flowers have already matured before ours have bloomed. This is bad. Then we will lose without a doubt. Faster, let's breathe spiritual energy too. Qin Bing, Qing Ming, and Zhang Dazhuang puffed up their cheeks at the same time and breathed spiritual energy at the spiritual flowers with all their might. Unfortunately, the flower fighting battle was not a competition of strength or realm, but of cultivation techniques of spiritual flowers. Although Long Gang and the other 3 were extremely talented, Compared to Elder Hua's miraculous cultivation techniques, they were left behind by 10th Street. On the other side, Elder Hua only needed one breath to make all the curled leaves of the Bingdi flower uncurl. On the other hand, Qin Bing and the others had to take more than 20 breaths to make the leaves of the Bingdi flower uncurl. The surrounding martial artists no longer paid attention to Long Gang and the others. They all looked at Elder Hua, and many of them even cheered loudly. Elder Hua, do your best. Ha ha ha, if you crack the twin spiritual flowers, the flower fairy will also fall into the mortal world. At that time, we will all have a chance to get close to her. Hee, it's not just the flower fairy. As long as the twin spiritual flowers are cracked, the other 14 spiritual flowers of the Flower Fairy Palace will definitely not be able to escape from Elder Hua's evil hands. Following the cheers of the martial artists, the flower fairies and Du Sanyang's expressions became more and more unsightly. They discovered that Elder Hua's method of cultivating the spirit flowers was even more exquisite than 3 years ago. In just half an hour, under the dense spiritual energy of Elder Hua, the twin flowers had grown rapidly from seedlings to buds. At this rate, the twin spiritual flowers, which was known as the most difficult flower fairy palace, might really be cracked by this old man easily. That would definitely be a disaster for the Flower Fairy Palace. On the other hand, on Long Gang's side, Qin Bing and the other 3 were only barely able to make the twin spiritual flowers grow out of seedlings. The difference between the two was like the difference between a grandmaster and an apprentice. Long Gang and the other 3 were already in complete despair, but they did not give up. Even if they lost, they did not want to lose. These 4 young masters were stubbornly holding their breath. Even if they knew that they would be beaten to a pulp, they still did not want to admit defeat. Yi Fei was also very anxious. Although Long Gang and the other 3 were working hard, at this rate they would definitely lose. Forget it, let's give it a try. Yi Fei did not care that he was a layman. After watching for an hour, he had learned the basic cultivation techniques of spiritual flowers. He took a deep breath. Immediately, Yi Fei gathered his Zhen Yuan and prepared to spray it at the spiritual flowers. Sensing Yi Fei's Zhen Yuan, the originally flourishing spiritual flowers suddenly withered like frosted eggplants. This was because Yi Fei's Zhen Yuan from the Devil Emperor Sutra was too tyrannical. This was a martial art that was created for battle. How could these weak spiritual flowers resist it? Just a light breath was enough to scare the spiritual flowers. If he really sprayed it, the spiritual flowers would probably wither immediately. Brother Yi, don't. Oh no, I forgot to tell him that he doesn't need to use a martial art that is too tyrannical. Qin Bing and Long Gang both had sullen faces as they gave up on cultivating the spiritual flowers. Qing Ming and Zhang Dazhuang's faces were also dark. They were already prepared to crawl out of the Flower Fairy Palace. The most depressed person was still Yi Fei. If he had known that the spiritual flowers were so fragile that they would fall with a single blow, he would not have done anything. Suddenly, the little girl hiding in the beast mark sighed and revealed her little head. When she saw Yi Fei destroying the spiritual flowers, the little girl's eyes clearly showed that she could not bear to look at him. She looked as if she was looking at a big stupid pig. Chapter 482. Shocking the audience at the same time, Yi Fei's actions finally attracted the attention of Bai Tiancheng and the others. But when they saw Yi Fei actually use an offensive martial art to cultivate the spirit flowers, Bai Tiancheng could not help but laugh. Ha ha ha, look at that country bumpkin. He really is from the North Sea. He doesn't even know how to cultivate spirit flowers. Elder Hua seemed to want to show off and increase the pressure on the Flower Fairy Palace. He clearly could have continued to nurture the spirit flowers, but he did not do so. Instead, he turned his head and acted like a grandmaster, commenting on Yi Fei's crude methods as if he expected better from him. Humph, you are simply too stupid. How is this cultivating spirit flowers? This is simply destroying spirit flowers. I never thought that with my reputation, there would be a day when I would meet such a layman who doesn't know anything about flowers. What a disgrace! Elder Hua had a pained look on his face. It was as if having a flower fight with Yi Fei was an insult to him. Many warriors nodded in agreement with Elder Hua's words. Bai Tianqing sneered. Elder Hua, you still expect a country bumpkin from the North Sea to know the elegant way of flowers? Elder Hua, don't bother with those country bumpkins. Let the twin flowers bloom first. Seeing old Hua's gentlemanly demeanor and Yi Fei's crude methods, many of the spectating martial artists couldn't help but laugh out loud. Haha, this person is really a country bumpkin. He doesn't even know the basic taboo of cultivating spirit flowers, and he still has the nerve to make a move. There's no need to watch. Spirit flowers are so delicate that even the slightest breeze can cause them to wither. What's more, such a large amount of spirit energy is poured into them. There will be a good show to watch. It doesn't matter if this country bumpkin loses. Qin Bing, Long Gang, and the others will have to crawl out of the Flower Fairy Palace with him. The warriors discussed animatedly. Qin Bing, Long Gang, Qing Ming, and Zhang Dezhuang all had long faces. They did not blame Yi Fei, but secretly hated Bai Tianqing for falling into his trap. Yi Fei, don't take it to heart. Anyway, if we continue to compete, we won't win. It's just a matter of time. Qin Bing comforted Yi Fei. That's right. If we lose this time, we'll win it back when we go back to the Earth Roll. Long Gang and the other two had already made up their minds. Yi Fei didn't say anything. He only stared closely at the spirit flower that was about to wither after being destroyed by him. If his feeling wasn't wrong, when he blew out his spiritual energy, the Lingji doll also followed him and blew at the spirit flower. He was a layman, and it was true that he had gotten into trouble, but for some reason, the little girl hidden in the beast mark suddenly gave him an inexplicable confidence. Perhaps, with the help of the Ganoderma doll, I still have a chance to turn the tables. Yi Fei had such a strange thought in his mind, but his eyes never left the spirit flower in the flower pot. Haha, country bumpkin. Even if you stare at it for 10,000 years, you won't be able to catch up to Elder Hua's finger. Stop wasting time there. The few of you, hurry up and crawl out of the Flower Fairy Palace. Bai Tianqing walked forward and arrogantly pointed at the ground. Qin Bing's expression turned ugly. Seeing that Yi Fei still wasn't willing to give up, Long Gang and the other two sighed. Yi Fei, let's just admit defeat. With your spiritual energy, the spirit flower will probably wither long ago. Wait a little longer. There might still be hope for this spirit flower. Yi Fei was very unwilling, and he couldn't accept the fact that they had to crawl out of the Flower Fairy Palace. It wasn't that Yi Fei couldn't afford to lose, but that he wouldn't easily give up even if there was a sliver of hope. There's still hope? Could it be that the spirit flower hasn't completely withered? Among Qin Bing and the other three, Long Gang was the one who understood spirit flowers the best. He immediately pulled himself together and used his spiritual energy to continue nurturing the spirit flower. There's still hope. Elder Hua, what's going on? Bai Tianqing's laughter stopped abruptly. The Flower Fairy and Third Aunt Du were also very surprised to find that after being hit by Yi Fei's spiritual energy, not only did the originally delicate spirit flower not die, but it also gradually showed signs of vitality from its withered state. How is that possible? That spirit flower really came back to life? Could it be that this person is hiding his strength and is actually an expert in nurturing spirit flowers? Originally, the Flower Fairy and Third Aunt Du were both angry and anxious when they saw Elder Hua's methods. Now that they suddenly saw Yi Fei reveal such a move, they stared at Yi Fei with sparkling eyes, and a new kind of hope appeared in their hearts. Elder Hua was also very surprised, and then he laughed disdainfully. It's just good luck. However, after experiencing the destruction just now, The spirit flower's foundation has been damaged. It will be difficult to make it bloom again. This battle ends here. This old man doesn't want to continue fighting with a layman who doesn't know anything. That would be an insult to the flower Tao. Yi! The little girl in the beast mark naturally heard Elder Hua's words. She was so angry that her cheeks puffed up and her face turned red. It was very cute. In the end, the one fighting Elder Hua now wasn't Yi Fei, but the little girl hidden in the beast mark. Yi Fei's heart suddenly moved, and he used telepathy to send a message. Can you help me nurture the spirit flower? Yi. The little girl proudly raised her head and puffed out her chest, gesturing that there was no problem. Then she suddenly blew at the spirit flower. However, in the eyes of outsiders, Yi Fei didn't do anything. His body only shook, and a gust of spirit wind blew around him, blowing towards the flower. This scene almost made Long Gang and the other two faint from fright. Damn, a spirit wind. Only a Flower Dao Grandmaster can activate a spirit wind, and such a strong one at that? Elder Hua, who was very disdainful and thought that fighting with Yi Fei would be an insult to the Flower Dao, widened his eyes in disbelief. It's actually a spirit wind. You are clearly a layman in the Flower Dao. How can you activate a spirit wind? Whoosh! As the spirit wind blew, the sickly spirit flower immediately grew. In the span of a dozen breaths, it had already grown as strong as the spirit flower that Elder Hua had nurtured. Many warriors who mocked Yi Fei were dumbfounded by this scene. Flower Fairy and Third Ant Do also widened their eyes as they watched this scene in disbelief. Yi Fei, you are actually a Flower Dao Grandmaster? Qin Bing looked at Yi Fei in shock. It was as though he was seeing Yi Fei for the first time. Impossible, this is absolutely impossible. Even if you're a Flower Grandmaster, there's no way the twin flowers can withstand such a powerful gust of spirit wind. Elder Hua couldn't believe what he was seeing. This completely overturned his knowledge of the Flower Dao that he had cultivated for more than 100 years. Seeing that the little girl was indeed very powerful, Yi Fei immediately felt emboldened. He finally turned his head coldly to look at Elder Hua. If you say it's impossible, then it's impossible. Who do you think you are? You think you are knowledgeable just because you are old? I think you are just a frog at the bottom of a well. Boom! Upon hearing Yi Fei's words, all the warriors were shocked. Since when had the number 1 Flower Dao Grandmaster in the capital been called a frog at the bottom of a well? If it were at the beginning, many people would have mocked Yi Fei for boasting shamelessly. Chapter 483. Perfect Bloom. Hearing Yi Fei's evaluation of him as a frog at the bottom of a well, Elder Hua was so angry that he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. In the imperial capital, if Elder Hua claimed to be second in mastery of flowers, no one would dare to claim to be first. However, this junior in front of him, who was lucky enough to trigger a spiritual wind, dared to act like a big shot in front of him. Elder Hua's face was filled with anger and humiliation. Impudent! Arrogant! How could martial artists like you who only focus on cultivation know the beauty of the Flower Dao? A junior like you is not qualified to compete with me, Elder Hua said angrily. Ha ha ha, we are indeed impudent, but it's still better than an old thing like you trying to flaunt your seniority. Long Gang and the other two already considered Yi Fei to be a hidden expert, so they were not so afraid of Elder Hua. Qin Bing also sneered at Bai Tianqing. How about it? Do you still want to compete? If not, the one who will crawl out will be you, Bai Tianqing. Many martial artists also looked at Bai Tianqing mockingly. Many of them had complaints about the Bai family's domineering attitude in the imperial capital. If they could see the Bai family being humiliated, it would be very delightful. Sensing Qin Bing's provocation and seeing everyone's mocking gaze, it was Bai Tianqing's turn to break out in cold sweat. He quickly walked to Elder Hua's side and asked fiercely, "Elder Hua, what's going on? Is that kid also a flower Dao expert? Flower Dao expert? How is that possible? With his crude and barbaric methods, if he is a flower Dao expert, I will never touch the flower Dao again in my life. After the initial shock, Elder Hua had completely calmed down. After observing Yi Fei's method of nurturing spiritual flowers, he was very sure that Yi Fei was a layman in the flower Dao. As for why Yi Fei could trigger a spiritual wind, Elder Hua had his own explanation. After all, the flower Dao evolved from the martial Dao. Some powerful martial artists, either by relying on their high realm or some special methods, could occasionally trigger one or two spiritual winds. However, that kind of spiritual wind could not be compared to a flower Dao expert who specialized in nurturing spiritual flowers. In that case, Elder Hua, the rest of the battle will depend on you. Give it your all and torture this North Sea country bumpkin to death. Bai Tianqing regained his confidence when he saw the confident expression on Elder Hua's face and retreated. Young Master Bai, don't worry. Today, this old man will teach this layman a lesson for insulting the way of flowers. Hua Lao roused his spirit, his eyes filled with coldness. Kid, your luck ends here. Today, this old man will show you, a layman, what is the real flower Dao. Whoosh. Then, Elder Hua's body moved and he actually used a set of strange footwork. Following this footwork, a black Bai Ling wind appeared and gently blew towards the spirit flower in front of him. As the spirit wind blew, the twin flowers stretched their green leaves lazily. Gradually, flower buds began to grow on them. Not good. It's Elder Hua's most powerful yin-yang spiritual wind. It's much more powerful than ordinary spiritual winds. Looks like this old man is getting serious. Don't be afraid. We have Yi Fei on our side. We will definitely win. Yi Fei, hurry up and make your move. Don't let that old man take the lead. Long Gang and the other two looked at Yi Fei anxiously. Qin Bing also urged him. Clearly, they all thought that Yi Fei was a flower Dao expert. Yi Fei was very depressed. He didn't know anything about flower Dao. However, although he didn't know, the Lingji doll hidden in his body was an expert. Xiao Chao, hurry up and make your move. Whether we can win or not depends on you. Yi Fei continued to communicate with the little girl telepathically. The little girl was very confused. Other than her, there was no one else in the beast mark. Where did the grass come from? Then, the little girl realized that the Xiao Chao that Yi Fei was talking about was actually her. The little girl's face instantly darkened. She angrily blew out a huge gust of spiritual wind. Of course, in the eyes of others, Yi Fei was still standing in the same place with an unfathomable appearance. They did not see Yi Fei move, but another gust of spirit wind that was even more ferocious and filled with spirit qi than before blew out. Feeling the strength of Yi Fei's spiritual wind, Bai Tianqing, who was watching the battle, laughed so hard that he spat out a mouthful of tea. Ha ha ha, look at this country bumpkin. Such a strong spiritual wind can even destroy a flower pot, let alone a delicate spiritual flower. Elder Hua is right. This person is a layman. Elder Hua will win. The Bai family will win. Let this country bumpkin crawl out quickly. Bai Tianqing's group of followers all laughed loudly. They all felt that Elder Hua would definitely win this time. Then, they looked towards Elder Hua. They saw that Elder Hua had already stopped in his tracks. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. His mouth was agape as he stared at Yi Fei. 7. Rainbow spiritual wind? How is that possible? I have been cultivating the flower Dao for hundreds of years and barely managed to cultivate a 2-colored spiritual wind. Kid, how can you cultivate a 7-colored spiritual wind at such a young age? Elder Hua was so shocked that his legs started to tremble. He knew that he had really misjudged this time. This kid in front of him wasn't a layman. He was clearly a top expert in the flower Dao. What was worse was that Yi Fei was still pretending to be a layman and deliberately deceiving him. What? Rainbow spiritual wind? Bai Tianqing's group had a mocking look on their faces. Only now did they realize that Yi Fei had really released a rainbow-like spiritual wind this time. This spiritual wind was completely inferior to Elder Hua's black Bai Ling wind. Bai Tianqing was shocked. Suddenly, he looked at Elder Hua with a ferocious expression. Elder Hua, what's going on? Didn't you say that he was a layman? I'll give you one last chance. No matter what method you use, you must defeat him. Otherwise, be careful of your head. Bai Tianqing was a little anxious. What a junior! I don't believe that I can't beat a junior like you after cultivating the flower Dao for hundreds of years. I'm going all out today. Seeing that the spiritual wind wasn't even on the stage in front of Yi Fei, Elder Hua staked everything. He suddenly spat out 3 mouthfuls of blood essence on the spiritual flower. Moreover, every time he spat out a mouthful of blood essence, his cultivation level would drop by 1. This old man was really going all out. Not good. That's Elder Hua's strongest flower Dao absolute art. It can connect the spiritual flower with his blood and allow it to grow faster. Brother Yi, don't hold back anymore. Hurry up and spit out blood too. Long Gang and the other 2 stomped their feet anxiously. If Elder Hua was the first to mature the spiritual flower, they would be the ones to lose. I won't spit out blood. Yi Fei shook his head. Moreover, every time he spat out blood, his cultivation level would drop by 1. Unless he was stupid, he wouldn't waste his blood essence for a spiritual flower. It was best to leave such a difficult problem to the little girl on him. Xiao Chao, hurry up and nurture this spiritual flower. This time we must win. Yi Fei was a little anxious. Yi! The little girl suddenly went on strike. She even spread out her hands very seriously and made a gesture of asking for benefits. Chapter 484. Flower Sage Edict. However, seeing Elder Hua's spirit flower growing faster and faster, Yi Fei had no choice but to lower his head and compromise. As long as you're willing to help me, I won't chase you away. That should be fine, right? The little girl then beamed with joy and made a hand gesture to Yi Fei, indicating a deal. Yi Fei was speechless. Long Gang and the others wanted to vomit blood. On the other side, the spirit flower that Elder Hua had painstakingly nurtured was about to bloom. However, Yi Fei was actually standing there in a daze at such a crucial moment. Long Gang was about to kneel down before Yi Fei as he cried out, Yi Fei, I'll call you uncle, alright? Please don't scare us, alright? That's right, Yi Fei. Show us what you've got. Qin Bing, Qing Ming and Zhang Dezhuang were also frightened by Yi Fei's sudden daze. Bai Tianqing naturally wouldn't let go of such a good opportunity to attack his opponent. He stood out and shook his head mockingly. Haha, even if you kneel down and beg that country bumpkin, it's useless. He's already out of tricks. Elder Hua, speed up, don't give that country bumpkin a chance to surpass you. Pooh. Elder Hua didn't say anything as he concentrated. Suddenly, he spat out a mouthful of blood and his cultivation dropped from level 9 martial honored realm to level 6 martial honored realm. Although his heart was pained, the thought of defeating this junior made Elder Hua's tired face reveal the joy of victory. Ha ha ha, I've finally won. Junior, you've forced me to this point. Even if you've failed, it's still a kind of glory. Elder Hua clasped his hands behind his back and regained the grandeur of a flower master. He didn't forget to secretly mock Yi Fei. It's over. Elder Hua has really broken my natal spirit flower. The twin flowers are about to bloom. The flower fairy's face suddenly turned pale. According to the rules of the Flower Fairy Palace, once her natal spirit flower was broken, it meant that she would fall from being a fairy to being a mortal. She would no longer be pure as ice and jade. If the other party forcefully made excessive demands and paid a sufficient price, she wouldn't be able to refuse. Third Madam, what should I do? The flower fairy grabbed Sanyang's hand. her palms full of cold sweat. Du Sanyang's heart was also in a mess at this time, but seeing that Yi Fei was only in a daze and did not admit defeat, she still held on to the last bit of hope. Lass, don't worry. This young Master Yi of the North Sea is a strange person. This flower battle concerns the dignity of him and his friends. He probably won't admit defeat so easily. What Du Sanyang didn't know was that Yi Fei's heart cooled down when he saw the golden light emitting from the flower buds of the twin flowers. Unfortunately, he knew nothing about the flower Dao. Not to mention spitting out blood, even letting out blood was useless. The only thing Yi Fei could do was constantly urge the little girl in the beast mark. Xiao Qiao, hurry up and make your move. If you lose, I'll kick you out of the beast mark. Do you believe me? Yi Fei threatened the little girl. The little girl pouted and looked neither too fast nor too slow. Suddenly, she stretched out her hand and motioned for Yi Fei to follow her as she gestured to the air. Yi Fei's face darkened. He had no choice but to rely on the little girl to show off his prowess. He helplessly followed the little girl's movements and gestured to the air. Seeing that Yi Fei was finally willing to move, Long Gang and Qin Bing perked up. Qin Bing asked Long Gang, what kind of flower Dao consummate skill is Yi Fei using? Is there still time? Long Gang's eyes widened as he watched Yi Fei's movements with rapt attention. After a while, he almost fell down. F***ck, what a crappy consummate skill. Yi Fei is riding to the air. There's no spiritual energy at all. Long Gang's words made by Tiancheng and many other warriors burst into laughter. Were they seeing things? At such a critical moment, Yi Fei was not in a hurry to win the battle, but he was actually in a daze and was even riding to the air. A country bumpkin will always be a country bumpkin. It's ridiculous. Bai Tiancheng shook his head. He no longer saw Yi Fei as an opponent. He naturally believed that under Elder Hua's superb flower Dao techniques, Yi Fei was at his wits' end. He was panicking and was beginning to give up. Many of the spectating cultivators shook their heads inwardly. They felt that Yi Fei had lost his composure. However, that was also the case. How could a junior be defeated so easily when facing one of the famous titans of the imperial capital? Sanyang, I'm finished. The rest of our sisters are finished. The flower fairy's eyes had already turned red. She knew that once Elderflower solved the most difficult twin flowers, he would definitely not let go of the other sister's natal spirit flowers, given how ferocious he was. Everyone no longer paid attention to Yi Fei. They all looked at Elder Hua expectantly, waiting for the moment when the flower Dao fully bloomed. Even Long Gang and Qin Bing were in despair. They also believed that Yi Fei might not be able to defeat Elder Hua. At this moment, Elder Hua's reaction was very strange. He looked at Yi Fei's gesture of riding to the air. At first, he was disdainful, but then he was stunned. When everyone's eyes focused on him, Elder Hua's face suddenly revealed a look of horror. He staggered back a few steps. Impossible. A junior like you actually learned the Flower Sage's edict. This is absolutely impossible. Without more than 100 years of cultivating the Flower Dao, it would be difficult for you to even become a Flower King. How could you possibly become a Flower Sage? Like the martial Dao, the Flower Dao was also divided into different realms. For example, Elder Hua used to be a flower sect. After 3 years of seclusion, he had already become a Flower King. But he was still far from becoming a Flower Sage. Hua Lao also refused to believe that Yi Fei, who was so young and had such a crude method of cultivating spiritual flowers, would actually be the elegant flower saint. Stop it for this old man. Therefore, under everyone's gaze, Elder Hua, who had the demeanor of a grandmaster and should have been enjoying victory and glory, rushed toward Yi Fei like a madman with bloodshot eyes. Unfortunately, Elder Hua was still a step too late. Yi Fei's gesture of riding to the air suddenly stopped. Suddenly, a rain of flowers appeared in the sky. It was as if a fairy had descended, as if the world of immortals had opened. There was a sea of flowers everywhere. The sky, the ground, and the water were all in full bloom. As the ancient flower Tao character in Yi Fei's hand condensed, all the flowers in the flower fairy palace withered and withered at the same time. Countless spots of light gathered at Yi Fei's fingertips from all directions. More accurately, they gathered at the little girl's fingertip. Then, she gently tapped the twin flowers in front of Yi Fei. A miraculous scene immediately happened. The twin flowers, which did not even have buds, suddenly blossomed with a rainbow-colored light. In the light, beautiful petals bloomed one after another in front of everyone's eyes. Cha! 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 As the twin flowers bloomed, all the birds and beasts in the flower fairy palace cried out in joy. Those with partners even snuggled up to each other, enjoying the moment of the twin flowers blooming. Chapter 485. Courting humiliation. The feeling that the flower fairy gave others had always been cold, pure, and ethereal. It was the first time that many people had seen her reveal such an expression because of a flower. Du Sanyang was even more shocked. As the head of the flower fairy palace, she knew best how important the natal spirit flower was to the women of the flower fairy palace. It was equivalent to their second life. In the past, it wasn't that no one had ever broken the natal spirit flowers of the flower fairy palace. For example, Elder Hua had broken half of the flower fairy palace's natal spirit flowers under the invitation of someone else, causing half of the flower fairy palace's natal spirit flowers to fall into the mortal world. He was hated by the flower fairy palace. However, due to the flower fairy palace's rules, as well as the fact that the nobles of the imperial capital valued Elder Hua, the flower fairy palace couldn't do anything to him no matter how much they hated him. Because of this, Elder Hua became fearless. However, even someone as powerful as Elder Hua was only able to make the spirit flower barely bloom. To be able to make a spirit flower bloom perfectly like Yi Fei, let alone Elder Hua, in the 100 years that the flower fairy palace had been in the imperial capital, no one had ever been able to do so. Flower Saint's Edict. This young Master Yi is actually a flower saint even more powerful than Elder Hua. Doesn't that mean that as long as he wants to, he can make all of our natal spirit flowers bloom perfectly in one breath? The flower fairy couldn't bear to touch the natal spirit flowers that were as beautiful as a paradise. She only raised her head and looked at Yi Fei with a complicated gaze. When Elder Hua saw this scene and saw the perfect flower Tao that he would never be able to achieve in his lifetime, he couldn't take this blow anymore. He spat out a mouthful of old blood in anger. His finger trembled as he pointed at Yi Fei. He was so angry that he didn't even have time to speak. As for the natal spirit flowers cultivated by Elder Hua, before they bloomed, they were overshadowed by Yi Fei's natal spirit flowers. In the end, they died of their own accord and quickly withered. What's going on? Elder Hua, your flower was about to bloom. Why did it suddenly wither? You old dog, tell me, did you lose to that country bumpkin on purpose? Did you team up with him to embarrass me and embarrass the Bai family? Bai Tianqing couldn't accept this result. One had to know that this wasn't just a simple showdown. It was also a matter of face for both sides. Whoever lost would have to crawl out of the flower fairy palace. How could Bai Tianqing accept such humiliation? Bai Tianqing directly accused Elder Hua of admitting defeat on purpose. Bai Tianqing's face turned green and he was about to slip away. The most depressing thing was that Long Gang and the others had yet to react. Their mouths were still agape as they stared at the perfectly blooming twin flowers in disbelief. We won. Qin Bing was also dumbfounded. He was still in a daze. Yi Fei could only remind them, that's right, we won. But it seems like the Bai family wants to act shamelessly and leave. What? Act shamelessly? Bai Tianqing, how dare you be a sore loser? Do you think we're pushovers that you can pinch whenever you want? Zhang Dazhuang's reaction was the fastest. After all, he had suffered at Bai Tianqing's hands before. How could he let this go? Qing Ming and Long Gang moved and blocked Bai Tianqing's path. Qin Bing coldly said, "If you agree to a bet, you must accept your loss. Whoever loses will have to crawl out of the Flower Fairy Palace." Bai Tianqing, you said it yourself. Everyone heard it with their own ears. Do you think you can get away with this by acting shamelessly? Qin Bing, all of you shut up. How can I act shamelessly? This old man is too despicable. He actually lost on purpose and framed me. Damned old man, I'll give you one more chance. Compete with him again. If you lose again, I'll take your life. Bai Tianqing angrily kicked Elder Hua. Although Elder Hua was valued by the nobles, it was because he could decipher the natal spiritual flower of the Flower Fairy Palace's fairies. Once he lost this advantage, with his current cultivation of rank 6 martial honorable, he would not receive any preferential treatment. Elder Hua naturally understood this logic. He also knew that in front of Yi Fei, the flower saint, he was just an ordinary flower king. Even if he studied flowers for 100 years, he would not be able to compare to one of Yi Fei's fingers. Young Master Bai, I'm sorry. The flower saint's edict is too overbearing. In front of the flower saint, this old man is just a frog at the bottom of a well. If I fight with him again, I'll only be asking for my own humiliation. Elder Hua's face was ashen. He had already lost all of his confidence after being beaten by Yi Fei. He was completely doubting his life. How could he have the courage to fight with Yi Fei now? Ignoring Bai Tianqing's ugly expression, Elder Hua respectfully knelt 3 times and kowtowed 9 times to Yi Fei. The ignorant old and decrepit greets senior flower saint. The old and decrepit is willing to accept his loss. Please punish me. Yi Fei felt quite awkward to be greeted by such a courteous old man and even called him a senior of the Flower Dao. However, even though it was awkward, Yi Fei would not go easy on his enemies. Get up. You're already so old. I don't want to make things difficult for you. From today onwards, you will leave the imperial capital and will not take a single step into the Flower Fairy Palace. Do you agree? Yi Fei thought for a moment and said, "The old and decrepit will follow the Flower Saint's edict. The old and decrepit will leave the imperial capital now and never return. I will never use the Flower Dao to harm anyone again." Elder Hua was extremely respectful. In front of Yi Fei, he looked like a student kneeling before his teacher. He was focused and dejected. He did not even look at Bai Tianqing as he turned around and strode out of the Flower Fairy Palace. Elder Hua, you traitor. Stop right there. Long Gang, Qin Bing, you better not cross the line. Don't forget who my big brother is. If you dare to humiliate me. Smack. Before Bai Tianqing could finish his sentence, Yi Fei, who had long been unhappy with him, walked over and slapped him across the face. So what if we humiliate you? Those who humiliate others will be humiliated by others. Since you humiliated us first, don't blame us for not holding back. Now, are you going to crawl out of the Flower Fairy Palace yourself, or do you want me to hit you until you crawl out? Hit Bai Tianqing until he crawls out? Qin Bing, brother Yi really came from the Taishan sacred ground. That's a little fierce. Long Gang clicked his tongue. Hee, fierce is good. Dazhuang and I like to make friends with fierce people. Qing Ming suddenly laughed sinisterly as he looked at Bai Tianqing. Zhang Dazhuang was even more direct. Almost at the same time as Yi Fei made his move, he had already taken a big step forward. His entire body was like a small mountain as he charged towards Bai Tianqing. Bai Tianqing, it's time to settle our scores. Dazhuang, don't be rash. If you want to fight, you should let us fight first. Don't push. Count me in. Qin Bing and Qing Ming and Long Gang were not polite at all. One of them was fiercer than the other. The flower fight just now had really frightened them. After all, they had almost lost the fight. They had been prepared to endure the humiliation and crawl out of the Flower Fairy Palace. They had been suppressing their anger because of this. Since Bai Tiancheng wanted to act shamelessly, they would naturally take the opportunity to teach him a lesson. Bam, bam, bam! The two sides immediately started fighting in the Flower Fairy Palace. Although Bai Tiancheng had more people on his side, Qin Bing was too fierce. Qin Bing was a LV6 martial king. Qin Bing alone was enough to defeat 5 people from Bai Tiancheng. Long Gang and the other 2 childs from the capital were also not easy to deal with. When the fight started, it was almost a one-sided massacre. At first, Bai Tiancheng was more stubborn and resisted 2 or 3 attacks. However, after being slapped by Yi Fei and kicked by Qin Bing, Zhang Dazhuang took the opportunity to launch a sneak attack. After loosening his teeth with his fist, Bai Tiancheng was finally scared. Chapter 486. Bai Tianyun had no choice but to cry and beg Du Sanyang for help. However, Du Sanyang ignored him as if she didn't hear him. The flower fairy was still looking at the perfectly blooming flowers in a daze. Then, she looked at Yi Fei with a complicated expression. No one knew what she was thinking. Long Gang, you guys are too ruthless. My teeth, it hurts. Bai Tianyun, hurry up and think of a way. Don't hit us, we know we were wrong. We'll leave now and draw a clear line with Bai Tianyun. Those who were with Bai Tiancheng were young masters from some big families in the imperial capital. They couldn't afford to offend Long Gang and Qin Bing. Seeing that Bai Tiancheng had suffered a great loss, they simply turned around and ran away, leaving Bai Tiancheng behind. Qin Bing didn't care about these people who had escaped. The 4 of them surrounded Bai Tiancheng and gave him a good beating. Bai Tiancheng was crying for his father and mother, constantly trying to seek help from the Flower Fairy Palace and the surrounding martial artists. However, no one came out to stop him. In the end, it was Bai Tianyun's fault. The Bai family had offended many people in the imperial capital. Seeing the Bai family's young master make a fool of himself in public, many people were secretly delighted. This is called reaping what you sow. Yi Fei shook his head. He had no intention of attacking. Long Gang and the other 3 were enough. In the end, Long Gang and the other 2 almost fell into Bai Tianyun's trap and suffered great humiliation. Now that they could finally hold their heads high, they wouldn't hold back. Even if they couldn't beat Bai Tianyun to death, they could still beat him half to death and throw him out like a dead dog. Bai Tianyun also understood this point. He wasn't worried about dying, but he was afraid that Long Gang and the other 2 would continue beating him endlessly. If more people saw this, it would be embarrassing. Don't hit me, I'll crawl, okay? Alright, Bai Tianyun. As long as you crawl out of the Flower Fairy Palace, we won't hit you. Long Gang and the other 2 were furious. Qin Bing and Zhang Dazhuang were also furious. It wasn't easy for them to get an epiphany, but it was deliberately interrupted by Bai Tianyun. For warriors, disturbing others' cultivation was an absolute taboo. If there weren't so many people here, they would have beaten Bai Tianyun to death. Crawl. Crawl right now. Qin Bing pointed at the Flower Fairy Palace in the distance. Qin Bing, Long Gang, I'll remember you. And that country bumpkin, my Bai clan will not let you off. Bai Tiancheng's expression was extremely ugly, but he was also afraid of being beaten up by Long Gang and the others. He could only slowly crouch down, preparing to crawl out of the Flower Fairy Palace and end this pain as soon as possible. Although it was easy for him to squat down, a 4th-layer martial emperor realm expert of the Bai clan had to crawl on the ground in front of the crowd. Bai Tiancheng's heart was filled with anger, which burst out like a tsunami. Damn it, this young master will endure today. Later, I'll ask my big brother to step in and ruthlessly torture that country bumpkin called Yi Fei to death. Bai Tiancheng finally placed his hands on the ground and prepared to crawl on the ground in humiliation. Bastard, Bai Tiancheng, what are you doing? Who allowed you to embarrass my Bai family like this? Suddenly, a furious roar came from the distant sky. That voice was like a clap of thunder, causing many of the onlooking warriors to turn pale. They couldn't help but retreat. Some of the weaker ones couldn't help but vomit blood. Many people's faces were filled with shock. Who was this arrogant person? The Flower Fairy Palace was a place where martial arts were prohibited. This person flying in the sky was already very rude, but he actually directly released a sound wave to injure people in a large area. Hearing this familiar voice, Bai Tianqing, who was lying on the ground with a bloody nose and a swollen face, suddenly felt as if he had seen his savior. He angrily jumped up and roared at the sky, "Big brother, avenge me! My Bai clan is being bullied so badly." "That person is Bai Tianyun?" Yi Fei frowned, looking at a white-clothed youth descending with an invincible aura. When Bai Tianyun descended, the entire Flower Fairy Palace slightly shook. Ninth Layer Martial Emperor Realm. Qin Bing opened his eyes wide and looked at Bai Tianyun with fear. Long Gang and the other two's faces also changed. They cursed in unison, "What bad luck!" When Bai Tianyun was an 8th Layer Martial Emperor, he was ranked 3rd on the Earth ranking. This time, after breaking through to the 9th layer, he's obviously aiming for the 1st place. Top 3 experts on the Earth ranking? Yi Fei also looked at Bai Tianyun in surprise. Sensing Yi Fei's gaze, Bai Tianyun coldly glanced at Yi Fei, a trace of surprise flashing in his eyes. "Disciple of the Taishan Holy Land, 6th Layer Martial Emperor Realm? You're the one who knocked out Bai Xiaolong with one palm?" "That's right, it's me. What, are you going to stand up for those fops?" Yi Fei looked at Bai Tianyun and asked. "Stand up for them? Then you're underestimating me, Bai Tianyun, Bai Xiaolong and the other two. They used their power to bully others and tarnished my Bai clan's reputation. I've already personally chopped off their heads as my Bai clan's apology to the cultivators everywhere." Bai Tianyun coldly snorted. With a wave of his hand, 4 bloody heads appeared on the ground. Many cultivators couldn't help but cry out in shock. Bai Tianyun was also so frightened that his pupils shrank. Bai Xiaolong and the others were his trusted subordinates who had followed him for many years. He didn't expect that they would be killed by Bai Tianyun because of a small mistake. Bai Tianyun suddenly felt a sense of sadness. After thinking about it, he was still unwilling to accept it. He angrily pointed at Yi Fei, then at Qin Bing and Long Gang, and complained to Bai Tianyun, "Brother, avenge me! These people worked together to frame me and wanted me to crawl out of the Flower Fairy Palace. That old dog Old Hua is also a good-for-nothing. If it wasn't for him, how could I have lost the flower battle?" Bai Tianyun was still complaining tearfully. He also believed that with so many people present, Bai Tianyun would definitely not sit by and do nothing for the sake of the Bai clan's reputation. However, whether it was Bai Tianyun, Qin Bing, or Long Gang, they all underestimated the extent of Bai Tianyun's ruthlessness. Before his younger brother could finish his words, Bai Tianyun had already snorted coldly and suddenly slapped Bai Tianyun's face. "Trash, my Bai clan's reputation has been ruined by you. You still have the face to talk to your elder brother." Pa! Bai Tianyun's slap was really heavy and ruthless. Bai Tianyun screamed and fainted on the spot from the pain. Without looking at his unconscious brother, Bai Tianyun stared coldly at Yi Fei. Then, he glanced at Du Sanyang, who was standing beside Yi Fei at some point in time. Finally, a hint of fear appeared on his face. "Qin Bing, Yi Fei, my Bai clan was in the wrong regarding the Heaven's Pride Hall. However, you shouldn't have injured my younger brother. Today, on account of the Flower Fairy Palace, I won't pursue this matter with you. When the Earth roll starts, you'd better not disappoint me too much." Humph. With a cold snort, Bai Tianyun grabbed the unconscious Bai Tianyun and stepped into the air, completely ignoring the Flower Fairy Palace's prohibition of martial arts. This Bai Tianyun is not bad. He actually didn't bully others with his power. Bai Tianyun is indeed the #1 genius of the Bai clan. Seeing Bai Tianyun come and go in a hurry and deal with matters swiftly and decisively, many martialists actually had a good impression of Bai Tianyun. Hearing these people's voices, Yi Fei sneered. Bai Tianyun's slap seemed to have taught Bai Tianyun a lesson, but in fact, it had secretly helped Bai Tianyun redeem his reputation. After all, Bai Tianyun was only beaten up. The Bai clan could still find an excuse to say that their skills were inferior. However, if Bai Tianyun really crawled out, the Bai clan would lose a lot of face. Chapter 487. No one can argue with Bai Tianyun's departure. There was no more drama to watch. The surrounding cultivators dispersed. Those who wanted to have fun went on having fun, and those who wanted to have fun went on having fun. Qing Ming and Zhang Dezhuang walked over with refreshed looks on their faces. They chuckled and said, "Brother Yi, you're indeed our lucky star. We've been unhappy with Bai Qing for a long time. This time, we've finally embarrassed him. But Brother Yi, you have to be careful. Bai Tianyun is not a simple person. You have offended the Bai clan this time. The Bai clan will definitely not let this matter rest." Qin Bing was still a little worried. "What are you afraid of? Don't forget, Yi Fei is the flower sage. At most, Brother Yi will follow me back to the Long clan. Let's see if Bai Tianyun dares to cause trouble in the Long clan." Long Gang patted his chest and said, "It's just a pity for Brother Dezhuang. It was not easy for him to enter a state of enlightenment, but he was interrupted." Qing Ming suddenly sighed. Zhang Dezhuang also lowered his head with a depressed expression. Even if they had taught Bai Tianyun a lesson, Qin Bing and Zhang Dezhuang's state of enlightenment was still interrupted. In fact, their side had suffered a greater loss. Yi Fei's face flashed with an apologetic look. After all, he was also partly responsible for this matter. Hence, he walked over and patted Zhang Dezhuang's shoulder, wanting to comfort him. Seeing that Zhang Dezhuang had been injured during the fight, Yi Fei sent a stream of quintessential essence over to heal Zhang Dezhuang's injuries. In the beast mark, the little girl was sitting cross-legged, panting. She was so tired that she could not even open her eyes. It was obvious that using the flower sage's edict without being discovered had consumed too much of her energy. She did not know that the battle outside had ended. Sensing that Yi Fei was using quintessential essence again, the little girl was very surprised. Could it be that the battle outside had not ended? It seemed that the old man outside was very powerful. She had to continue working hard. In the end, the little girl slept well in the beast mark. She was also not afraid of being captured by bad people at any time. She was not willing to move. Hence, while Yi Fei was sending quintessential essence to heal Zhang Dezhuang, the little girl also puffed up her cheeks and blew a mouthful of spirit qi outside. Following Yi Fei's quintessential essence, it poured into Zhang Dezhuang's body. Zhang Dezhuang let out a roar all of a sudden. He could feel that the true qi that Yi Fei had given him suddenly possessed some sort of strange power, causing his body to be filled with true qi. With a boom, he had broken through the barrier of his martial emperor realm and reached the third layer martial emperor realm in an instant. "Yi Fei, you actually helped me break through my realm." Zhang Dezhuang's eyes widened. His expression was almost exactly the same as Gu Man's. Qin Bing, Long Gang, and Qing Ming also looked as if they had seen a ghost. Yi Fei's method was simply too strange. Qin Bing quickly thought of something and said in shock, "The flower Dao is actually so miraculous. Not only can it nurture spiritual flowers, but it can also help people break through while healing?" "What? You can break through just by healing?" No wonder Gu Man was able to break through so easily in the Hall of Prodigies. Qing Ming and Zhang Dezhuang were shocked. They couldn't help but recall that outside the Hall of Prodigies, Yi Fei had also helped Gu Man heal. In the end, Gu Man had inexplicably broken through. Without saying a word, Long Gang had already crashed into a pillar under Yi Fei's shocked gaze. He had successfully smashed the pillar into pieces, and his forehead had also become bruised and swollen. Not good, Brother Yi. I'm also injured. Hurry up and use your spirit qi to heal me. Yi Fei, Qin Bing, Qing Ming and Zhang Dazhuang had already lowered their heads in shame. They quickly drew a clear line between themselves and Long Gang and pretended not to know this person. The Flower Fairy and Third Aunt Du were also speechless. Looking at Long Gang's appearance, they couldn't help but laugh. Third Aunt Du looked at Long Gang sympathetically and shook her head. Young Master Long, you can't do this. Although young Master Yi is a flower saint, his current spirit qi can only help cultivators who are at a bottleneck to break through. Of course, if young Master Yi can reach the Flower Emperor realm, he can guide the spirit qi of heaven and earth at any time to help you break through. It can't be. Is the flower Tao really that magical? Isn't it just an unorthodox way of pretending to be cultured? Yi Fei was very surprised. In his eyes, other than being very good at cultivating spirit flowers, the flower Tao couldn't see any other use. Compared to the pill Tao, array Tao, and artifact refining Tao, which had a huge supporting effect on cultivators, the flower Tao was not just a little bit inferior. Young Master Yi, you really know how to joke. Third Aunt Du thought that Yi Fei was joking. How could a dignified flower saint not understand the power of the flower Tao? I'm not joking. Actually, I don't know the flower Tao, and I'm not a flower saint. Third Aunt Du, can you please explain the flower Tao to me in detail? Hearing that the flower Tao seemed to be very powerful, Yi Fei suddenly became curious. Of course, his words successfully attracted the extremely disdainful gazes of everyone present. Brother Yi, we're all on the same side here. Stop pretending. At most, I won't let you heal, okay? Long Gang rubbed the big bump on his head, secretly thinking that he had bumped into it for nothing. Qin Bing and the other two also nodded repeatedly. They felt that Yi Fei was good at everything, but his habit of pretending to be low-key was really annoying. You're clearly a flower Tao saint. Why are you pretending? Flower Fairy also muttered softly. She was very dissatisfied with Yi Fei's habit of pretending for no reason. Yi Fei was very depressed. Only the heavens knew that what he said was completely true. He really didn't know anything about the flower Tao. Could he say that the one who was truly proficient in the flower Tao was actually the little girl hidden in the beast mark? Cough cough, please enlighten me. Yi Fei thickened his skin and continued to ask Third Aunt Du for guidance. Third Aunt Du looked at Yi Fei very strangely. What did this brat mean? Could it be that he was the same as that Elder Hua and wanted to ruin the reputation of the many fairies of the Flower Fairy Palace? Thinking of this, Third Aunt Du's entire face became dignified. She thought that Yi Fei said this to remind the Flower Fairy Palace of how much damage a true Flower Tao saint could do to the Flower Fairy Palace. Young Master Yi, I understand what you mean. Since you've cracked the Flower Fairy's natal spiritual flower and let the Bingdi flower bloom perfectly, according to the rules of the Flower Fairy Holy Sect, you have every reason to raise any conditions to the Flower Fairy, including having her serve you in bed. Third Aunt Du's face was cold. The Flower Fairy's body was also on the verge of collapse. She had a despairing and distressed expression. Originally, when she saw Yi Fei display his invincible might and defeated Elder Hua, she thought that Yi Fei was a good person. She didn't expect that Yi Fei was no different from the other men who came to the Flower Fairy Palace. He was just coveting their beauty. When Qin Bing and the other three heard Third Aunt Du's words, they all showed expressions of sudden understanding. Long Gang even gave Yi Fei a thumbs up in admiration. Brother Yi, you're still the best. No wonder you always like to pretend to be a layman. So you have an ulterior motive. Whine your sister. Yi Fei's face darkened. He really wanted to kick Long Gang to the side. He simply didn't understand the flower Tao. He didn't have the intention to take advantage of the situation to blackmail them. Third and do, you may have misunderstood. Since we can't come to an agreement, then I'll take my leave. Yi Fei turned and left. As for having the flower fairy serve him in bed, forget it. Chapter 488. Helpless. Seeing that Yi Fei was really going to leave the Flower Fairy Palace, Qin Mo was stunned. Qin Bing and the other three were stunned. Could it be that they had misunderstood and that Yi Fei was not interested in the Flower Fairy? But looking at Yi Fei's appearance, they really couldn't believe that Yi Fei was actually a layman in the Flower Dao. The Flower Fairy and Du Sanyang were even more confused. Sanyang, what should we do? What else can we do? Regardless of whether this person really doesn't know or has other motives, he has the strength of a flower saint. If we offend such a person, it will be a disaster for our entire Flower Fairy Palace. Du Sanyang gritted her teeth and suddenly chased after Yi Fei with large strides, looking pleadingly at him. Young Master Yi, please be magnanimous and let our Flower Fairy Palace go. As long as you promise not to use the Flower Dao to attack our Flower Fairy Palace, you can name any conditions you want. Even if you want the Flower Fairy to be your concubine, I will agree. Du Sanyang and the Flower Fairy both had distressed expressions. To the Flower Fairy sacred sect, they weren't afraid of the warrior saint's anger, but they were only afraid of the flower saint. Du Sanyang naturally didn't dare to let Yi Fei leave in a rage. She even took the initiative to change the condition from sleeping with him to concubine. The Flower Fairy actually didn't object, and had a resolute look on her face. Even if she were to jump into a fire pit, she had already decided to sacrifice herself for the sake of her sisters not being defiled by Yi Fei. This scene once again stunned Qin Bing and the other three. Other than Qin Bing, Long Gang, Qing Ming, and Zhang Dezhuang were already prostrating themselves in admiration of Yi Fei. What a good move of loosening the reins in order to capture, retreating in order to advance. Brother Yi is indeed a veteran in the field of flowers. You can even do such a beastly thing. Long Gang was extremely envious. Zhang Dezhuang and Qing Ming were also extremely envious. Which of these young masters in the imperial capital didn't want to marry a fairy? But no one had ever succeeded. Brother Yi was still the one who had the means. Without doing anything, he could just flick his sleeves and leave, and scare the Flower Fairy Palace into voluntarily giving their most beautiful fairy to Brother Yi as a concubine. Yi Fei looked at Du Sanyang, who was stopping him and begging him. He felt very depressed in his heart. I already said that I'm not a Flower Dao saint. Why don't these people believe me? It was all because of the little girl in the beast mark. Speechless, the one who had to clean up the mess was himself. Yi Fei felt depressed. He glanced at the Flower Fairy and realized that she was looking at him very nervously. There was even a hint of red on her face. Yi Fei was even more speechless. He could only continue to pretend to be the flower sage. He shook his head and said, "Third Aunt Do, don't worry. I swear that I won't attack any of the fairies of the Flower Fairy Palace. Is that all right?" Long Gang and the other three were stunned again. What did Brother Yi mean? How could he not eat the fatty meat that had been delivered to his mouth? The Flower Fairy was pleasantly surprised. "Young Master Yi, is what you said true? Are you really willing to swear that you won't use the Flower Dao to deal with any sisters of my Flower Fairy Palace?" "I swear that if people don't offend me, I won't offend them. Besides, I don't know anything about the Flower Dao. I don't have the ability to do anything even if I wanted to." Seeing Yi Fei really swear, the Flower Fairy was pleasantly surprised. Only now did she realize that Yi Fei wasn't the kind of bad person she thought he was. He was actually a very good person. It made sense. He was able to enter the Flower Sage Dao and make the Bingdi flowers bloom so perfectly. How could such a young master have a bad heart? The Flower Fairy's face suddenly blushed. She looked even more beautiful against the backdrop of the Bingdi flowers. Long Gang and the other two were stunned. Qin Bing also had a look of amazement on his face. After Yi Fei finished swearing, the flower fairy looked seriously at Yi Fei and swore, "I, the flower fairy, also swear that as long as young Master Yi doesn't harm my flower fairy palace or my sisters, as long as young Master Yi is willing, I can give you my body and heart at any time." When she had no choice but to say such shameful words, the flower fairy was so embarrassed that she didn't dare to face Yi Fei. She stomped her feet and glanced at Third Aunt Du. Then she quickly ran back to her own palace and didn't come out again. Damn, that's possible. As expected of the flower sage, he conquered the flower fairy's body and heart so quickly. His methods are too cruel. He's worse than a beast. Long Gang, Qingming, and Zhang Dezhuang watched the flower fairy leave shyly. Their faces were filled with envy and jealousy. Qin Bing also sighed. "Brother Yi, if you can't be considered a flower sage, then the four of us are too ashamed to show our faces. Brother Yi, if it's convenient, please enlighten us." Yi Fei was so depressed by the flower fairy's sudden promise that he wanted to vomit blood. He looked at Qin Bing and the other three, then at Third Aunt Du, and sighed helplessly and seriously. "Everyone, I'm really not a flower sage. I don't know anything about the flower Tao. Why don't you believe me? Brother Yi, don't be so humble. We all know that your flower sage Tao is reserved and reserved. You can capture a beauty's heart without her noticing," Long Gang said as he walked over. "Young Master Yi, don't joke around. But since young Master Yi has said so, my flower fairy palace can't be stingy. We have many books on the flower Tao here, and we even have a flower sage's insights. If you're interested, you can stay here and read them. Of course, if you bring friends to my flower fairy palace in the future, all fees will be waived." Third Aunt Du also heaved a sigh of relief. Even if Yi Fei had sworn not to use the flower Tao against the flower fairy palace, Third Aunt Du didn't dare to slight a dangerous flower sage like Yi Fei. She had already decided that no matter what, she had to be on good terms with Yi Fei. It would be best if she could worship Yi Fei. Yi Fei was completely helpless. He knew that the flower fairy palace wouldn't be at ease if he didn't agree. He could only nod reluctantly. "All right, the flower sage's book is over there. Take me to see it." Realizing that the flower Tao wasn't as bad as he thought, Yi Fei was still a little interested in studying it. Leaving Qin Bing and the others to continue sightseeing in the flower fairy palace, Yi Fei followed Third Aunt Du to a room in the deepest part of the flower fairy palace. Seeing that it was filled with books, Third Aunt Du said, "Young Master Yi, this is the former flower sage's residence. All his flower Tao books are recorded here. You can read them as you wish." With that, Third Aunt Du respectfully retreated. She treated Yi Fei as the most distinguished guest. Yi Fei wasn't used to it, but he couldn't refuse. He could only walk into the study and pick up a book. He discovered that it happened to be a book that recorded the origins of the flower Tao. Flowers also have Tao. Martial arts have martial arts, and pill Tao have pill Tao. The flower Tao was born out of martial arts and formed in pill Tao. However, it is very different from the Tao of martial arts. This is the Tao of scholars, the Tao of mortals, the Tao of immortality. Every word in this flower sage's book was exquisite. It wasn't boring to read, but rather fascinating. Yi Fei only wanted to take a casual glance, but after reading for a while, he couldn't take his eyes off it. So I was wrong. The flower Tao isn't an unorthodox Tao. In ancient times, it was actually the same as pill Tao and array Tao. They were all strange martial Taos. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.